Chapter 9:27. On the outskirts of the southern district of Saint Splendor City, a beautiful and unique manor stood in the middle of a tranquil lake and mountain scenery. This was the Ling family's mansion, and it was the only one in the entire southern residential area. It was already evening, and the night sky was gradually darkening. The dining room of the Ling family's mansion was already filled with people. Aside from Ling Xingqi, Ling Xingwen, and Fong Lin, there was also a middle-aged lady dressed in luxurious clothing. This person was Ling Zhixing's wife, Zhu Bihua. Ling Zhixing had a total of 5 wives, but only Zhu Bihua was still alive. Her identity wasn't simple. She was the eldest daughter of the Holy Grail Federation's Bu family. The Bu family seemed like a sect, but in reality, they were a hidden financial magnate within the Federation. The reason the Starry Rainbow Group was able to develop to its current scale was because of the marriage between Ling Zhixing and Zhu Bihua. Zhu Bihua's 2 daughters were Ling Xingqi and Ling Xingwen. Today was the 8th day of the Fengyun Convention, and Fong Lin's elimination had already affected the Starry Rainbow Group's plans. Thus, the whole family had received a notice from Ling Zhixing to have dinner together at home. Fong Lin was originally Zhu Bihua's personal bodyguard, and had followed her for many years. Now that the Starry Rainbow Group was on the right track, Zhu Bihua no longer needed to worry about the company's affairs. Basically, she was idle at home, so Fong Lin spent most of her time moving around with Ling Xingwen. Of the 2 daughters, Zhu Bihua doted on Ling Xingwen the most. In fact, Ling Xingwen was originally a proud daughter of the heavens. Her martial arts talent was very high, even higher than Ling Xingqi's. However, when she was 13, she fell seriously ill. After a long year of treatment, her body became weak, and she wasn't suitable for strenuous exercise. As for cultivation, it was even more impossible. At that time, the Federation's medical system wasn't as advanced as today's. By the time Ling Xingwen truly recovered, he was already 26 years old. Basically, he had missed the golden age of awakening and was destined to not have much success on the path of origin ability users. Ling Xingwen decided to stop focusing on her cultivation and put her energy into the company's affairs. Ling Xingwen had shown outstanding talent in social interaction. At least, she believed that her talent in this area was unmatched. In fact, it was because of her parents' reputation that few people in the Federation went against her. Therefore, she had developed a haughty and violent temper. However, now that she was back with her mother, she had to control her temper. At this moment, Ling Xingwen was sitting at the long dining table, as quiet as a good girl. Alin, the person who injured you last time, is called Ding Meng. Is it also Ding Meng who eliminated you this time? Zhu Bihua was obviously in disbelief. Fong Lin respectfully replied, Sister Hua, we'll have to wait for Brother Xing and Third Miss to come back before we can make an accurate judgment. What's this situation? Zhu Bihua's expression was somewhat unhappy. Ling Xingqi hurriedly explained, Xingxian has dealt with Ding Meng many times. She should be more familiar with Ding Meng's movements. Zhu Bihua disdainfully snorted, You should all reflect on yourselves. Why did you fall at the hands of a refugee over and over again? Moreover, this refugee used to be a laborer. This question was truly a headache. The twists and turns of this matter couldn't be explained in a few words. Ling Xingqi really wanted to say, That kid was killed by me before, but he could revive and even kill Uncle Wu and the others. This matter might not be a big deal to Ding Meng, but Ling Xingqi had been locked up at home by Zhu Bihua for half a year. Every day, she had to face the wall and reflect on her mistakes. Wu Cangjin and the other masters used to be members of the Bu family. When Zhu Bihua got married, they followed her to the Ling family. At this moment, the door opened. Ling Zhixing, with a serious expression, came in with 2 old men. Behind the 2 old men were the Transit String and Jin Xiaoyan. Zhu Bihua frowned and said, This isn't the company. Why did you bring your secretary to a family dinner? Jin Xiaoyan instantly blushed and said, I'm sorry, madam. I'll leave immediately. Zhu Bihua didn't look at her. She turned her head to the other side and said, Humph. Ling Zhixing frowned and said, Xiaoyan, you've had a hard time recently. Stay. Jean Xiaoyan didn't dare to say anything. She stood obediently behind the transit string. Sit. Ling Zhixing looked around and said, there are no outsiders here. We're all family. After all, he was the head of the family. Zhu Bihua didn't dare to object. The 9 of them quickly took their seats. Ling Zhixing naturally sat in the center seat. He didn't look relaxed. It was obvious that he wasn't in a good mood. All in, I expected you to at least enter the top 16. Fang Lin lowered her head and said, Brother Xing, I'm sorry to disappoint you. Ling Zhixing waved his hand, which meant that he didn't blame her. Is the real identity of that crazy guy Ding Meng? Ling Zhixing asked the transit string. No matter how much Zhu Bihua disliked the transit string, she had to admit that among the 3 sisters of the Ling family, the transit string wasn't the strongest, the prettiest, or the most powerful. However, the transit string's overall ability was the strongest. Ling Zhixing had appointed the transit string to the position of CEO because he recognized the transit string's abilities. Yes, the real identity of that crazy guy is Ding Meng. The transit string answered calmly. There was no point in hiding Ding Meng now. As the storm meet went on, more and more experts would be exposed. Ding Meng's identity would be dug out sooner or later. Ling Zhixing's face was full of black lines. This was a very troublesome problem. If the identity of that crazy guy was Ouyang Wang, it wouldn't be a problem. The results of the competition could still be discussed with Yu Tianlin. Although Sheng Hao and Xing Hong were at odds with each other on the surface, there were many important matters that the 2 families had to negotiate. This included competitions like the Storm Gathering. With the power of the 2 families, the results of many competitions could be controlled. However, now that Ding Meng had popped out again, this situation gave Ling Zhixing a headache. This was because Ling Xingqi was going to face Ding Meng tomorrow. This was an extremely crucial match that was related to the overall plan of the Xinghong Corporation. Xingqi. Ling Zhixing looked away again. Ling Xingqi also turned her head. Dad, Ling Zhixing said, the new energy sources that we found in the past 2 years were mostly allocated to you as cultivation resources. How confident are you in facing off against Ding Meng? This was also a very difficult question. Ling Xingqi pondered and said, if Ding Meng stays at the level he was on the Poison Dragon Star, then I'm 100% confident. However, after today's fight with Ant Fong, I feel that he has improved a lot in the past few years. If we really fight, it's hard to say who will win. I can only say that I'm 50% confident. Ling Zhixing turned his head and looked at the old man in a suit behind him. Old Long, what do you think? Old Long slowly answered, if it were me, I'd be 70% confident. However, I personally still hope that young mistress will be noticed by the higher-ups. We're all old bones and don't have much development left. Ling Xingqi quickly said, Old Long, you're too humble. Transit String said, Dad, Old Long, other than Ding Meng, the Bingyi group has 2 other experts participating in the competition. We can't underestimate them. Before Ling Zhixing could answer, Ling Xingwen was dissatisfied. Little sister, what do you mean by this? Why do you keep praising others and diminishing our own strength? How can a small Bingyi group be compared to our Star Bao group? Transit String said calmly, Second sister, Ding Meng's power has already been established. He's no longer the small individual he used to be. Moreover, we don't know what their real motive is for participating in the Storm Gathering. What if they're not going for the prize pool? Ling Xingwen argued, if they're not going for the prize pool, then are they going for me? Transit String was speechless. Sometimes, one's team would have a useless teammate. This was the situation in front of them. You didn't know anything at all. Moreover, with Ding Meng's current strength and reputation, why would he go for you alone? Old Long also nodded. That Dai, he really can't be underestimated. Although there's a gap between her and young mistress, the gap isn't that big. The other old man's eyes flashed. He clearly wanted to say something. Ling Zhixing said, Brother Tian, what about you? What do you think? Elder Tian was clearly deep in thought. Young mistress, our train of thought is quite clear. We want you to be noticed by the higher-ups. Therefore, you have to win tomorrow's match. According to your previous description and the information we've collected, I'm guessing that Ding Ming doesn't have any divine light equipment. It was shocking that he could see this. Ling Xingqi was also shocked. Is that really the case? Elder Tian nodded. I watched Arlene's match today. Ding Ming used the blazing sun battle mark instead of the divine light ray he used in the past. I'm guessing that he has lost his equipment. Otherwise, there's no way that a 9-star martial arts technique wouldn't be able to trigger his equipment. You can use this to your advantage. Ling Xingqi's eyes flashed. She was clearly thinking about the reason behind this as well. Transit String decisively rejected this idea. Elder Tian, you guys better not think this way. Ding Ming isn't the kind of person who relied on the divine light energy to suppress others. I feel that he doesn't have any divine light equipment. It's not that he doesn't have any, but that he doesn't need them anymore. Are you questioning Elder Tian? Ling Xingwen glared at her. Transit String said calmly, I just think that it's better to be careful. Many losses are caused by underestimating the enemy. Ling Xingwen was furious. Why are you always speaking up for others? Can't you think for your own family? Transit String frowned. Second sister, if you had respected him a little, the Bingy group might have been able to be used by us. The situation wouldn't be as bad as it is now. Ling Xingwen said angrily, What's the point of bringing up the past now? Transit String argued, It's not scary to make a mistake. What's scary is to make the same mistake twice. It'll be a big mistake that'll be hard to undo. Ling Xingwen waved her hand. It's not up to you to teach me how to do things. Transit String suddenly stood up and stared at the table expressionlessly. I'm full. I'll leave first. The table was empty. The food hadn't even been served yet, but she said she was full. She wasn't full from eating, but from anger. This wasn't the first time this had happened. It had happened many times over the years. Transit String never returned to the Ling family, unless it was something extremely important. She had her own house outside. Ling Xingqi had already stood up. Dad, Mom, I'll go talk to little sister. Okay. Zhu Yuehua nodded. Talk to her to calm down. Ever since Ling Zhixing came back, she had only said this one sentence. Chapter 928. The riverside at night was picturesque. Transit String walked alone on the path, unhappily. At this moment, Jin Xiaoyan didn't follow her. Only Ling Xingqi followed her silently. When they came to a rockery and a potted plant, Transit String bent down and picked up a thin stone. Then, she used her strength to cut it into the river. The stone flew up and down on the water surface, creating a beautiful splash. Ling Xingqi watched the water. She knew that Transit String would only do this childish thing when she was in a bad mood. I remember that when you first came here when you were a child, you liked to play with water. Ling Xingqi said quietly. Transit String also nodded silently. Because it doesn't cost money to play with water, Ling Xingqi understood the meaning of this sentence. Transit String had suffered too much when she was a child. When she first came to the Ling family, she was really skinny. For her, things that didn't cost money were good things. Of course, with today's Transit String status, there was nothing she couldn't afford. However, playing with water had become a very luxurious thing. This was the trouble of people in rich families, because they couldn't enjoy the happiness of ordinary people. Even if they could, they wouldn't be as happy as before. Little sister, I know you have resentment, Ling Xingqi said sadly. Transit String didn't answer her directly. She picked up another stone to play with water. Big sister, you didn't do anything wrong. You don't have to apologize to me. Ling Xingqi knew her resentment. She didn't hate Ling Xingwen, but her parents. Because every time Ling Xingwen made things difficult for her, her parents always remained silent. Silence meant acquiescence, and acquiescence meant indulgence. After all, she wasn't Zhu Bihua's biological daughter. Therefore, many things were unconsciously treated differently. For example, if Ling Xingwen was arrogant and domineering outside, her parents basically didn't care. However, if Transit String made any mistakes at work, her position as the CEO would probably be shaken. Ling Xingqian's mood seemed to have calmed down after continuously chipping away several stones. He turned his head and said, Big sister, I've always wanted to ask you a question. Do you really view Ding Meng as an enemy like second sister? Ling Xingqi pondered and said, from the group's point of view, Ding Meng is indeed an enemy. He has ruined our plans time and time again. But from my personal point of view, he was really a strong enemy a few years ago. After all, he killed old Wu and the others. This debt has not been settled yet. The transit string asked, what about now? Ling Xingqi shook her head. I don't think he's an enemy anymore. There are people who are far more threatening than him. The transit string continued. Then have you thought about what will happen if you lose to him in tomorrow's match? That's impossible. Ling Xingqi immediately denied. All right. The transit string knew that her elder sister was stubborn and would never admit defeat easily. Even if you beat him, what about after that? What about Lei Jingtian, Ouyang Guang, and Nanxuan? Are you confident? Ling Xingqi remained silent. No matter how stubborn she was, she didn't dare to say that it was impossible for her to win. Basically, all of the experts from the Federal Empire had appeared in this year's event. Who would dare to say that they could beat so many experts by themselves? Little sister, you seem to think highly of Ding Meng? Ling Xingqi asked. The transit string nodded. Elder sister, I won't hide it from you. I also have investments in the Bingyi group. Ling Xingqi looked at her in shock. If her parents found out about this, the transit string would probably be punished. It was also possible that Zhu Bihua would kick her out of the Ling family. Little sister, do you know what you're doing? Ling Xingqi said coldly. The transit string looked at her. Elder sister, if it weren't for the fact that we've been close since we were young, I wouldn't have told you this. Ling Xingqi said, but this isn't a reason for you to work with the Bingyi group. The transit string paused, then said, Elder sister, back then on Poison Dragon Planet, Ding Meng stole the divine light energy. What price did we pay? Now that you've found the divine light energy, what price did we pay? Even if you stand at the peak of the storm gathering now, have you thought about it? What price will you pay? Ling Xingqi was a smart person. She understood with a hint. Every time the divine light energy was fought over, there would be a storm of blood. The price that Xing Hong had to pay increased each time. Once you came into contact with the deeper secrets of the core, you would have to consider whether you could afford to pay an even higher price. If you couldn't, then you would be facing a disaster. I invested in the Bingyi group precisely because of Ding Meng's ability in this aspect. Every time there's chaos, he's always the one who has the last laugh. Don't you think the pattern behind this is worth thinking about? The transit string said earnestly, you might not know, but he has grudges with the Empire ruler, the king of the devouring world, the royal family of the Steel Main Empire, and the top underground forces in outer space. This time, if he really has connections with the upper echelons of the Federation, only this kind of person would be safe and sound. He's also the only one who rushed to the front and took a lot of risks for us. Ling Xingqi couldn't help but admit that the transit string's foresight and structure were much better than her and Ling Xingwen's. It was no wonder that her father had always recommended her little sister to be the CEO of Xing Hong. The transit string seemed to know what she was thinking and sighed. But the future leader of the Xing Hong group is not destined to be me. Ling Xingqi fell silent again. The Xing Hong group would be handed over to Ling Xingwen sooner or later. This wasn't something that could be changed by one person's will. This was the result of the interests of the Ling family and the Biu family. The transit string saw through this very clearly, but there was nothing she could do. For a long time, Zhu Bihua had a very big prejudice against the transit string. Perhaps Zhu Bihua herself didn't have such a big opinion of the transit string, but the Biu family was very dissatisfied with Ling Zhixing marrying his fifth wife. The transit string's mother, Gong Ruhong, and Ling Zhixing met at a banquet in Blue Pole Star City. The two fell in love at first sight. Everyone knew that polygamy was allowed in the Federation, but this matter still caused the Biu family to be dissatisfied. Because of Zhu Bihua, the Biu family injected a large amount of wealth into the Xing Hong group at that time, causing the Xing Hong group to rise rapidly and return to a situation where it was very rich and powerful. However, although the Biu family was dissatisfied with the marriage between Ling Zhixing and Gong Ruhong, they didn't interfere. This was because Gong Ruhong's energy group was about to be merged into the Xinghong group. If the Xinghong group could become bigger and stronger, this was a good thing for everyone. The rich and powerful had always been like this. Benefits came first, and as long as the benefits were great enough, status, morals, and relationships all fell behind. Of course, what happened after that was more or less unexpected. Not long after giving birth to the transit string, Gong Ruhong died in an accident. The official announcement was that Gong Ruhong died in a plane crash. Because Gong Ruhong's energy group inevitably had to deal with the major transportation forces in outer space, they were intercepted by pirates on their way back to the Azure system. The starship was attacked and crashed. It was said that the pirates weren't a normal force, but the largest pirate group in the Fertile Chalk system. This was also related to the Chuangyu of the Norse Empire. When Ling Xingxin was young, she led a wandering life. It wasn't until she was 14 that she was able to contact Ling Zhixing and come to the Ling family. It was because of this that Ling Xingqi took extra care of her half-sister. Thinking up to this point, Ling Xingqi didn't hold any grudges against the transit string investing in the Bingyi group. In the future, the transit string was destined to leave the Xinghong group. By then, with the status of a shareholder of the Bingyi group, she wouldn't have to worry about food for the rest of her life, right? She now knew that the Bingyi group was jointly managed by Lan Bing and Liang Iran. Liang Iran also had the backing of Hongyu. This way, the transit string was even more secure. Ling Xingqi suddenly said, "I heard from my father that the Hao family is asking about our family. When are you and Haodong going to settle on a date?" The transit string said, "Do you really think I want to marry a rich playboy like Haodong?" Ling Xingqi frowned and said, "Haodong isn't bad." The transit string said in disdain, "If his father isn't a general in the military, what good does he have?" Ling Xingqi said, "That's true." The transit string said, "If I really wanted to marry, Ding Meng would be the most suitable person to marry. Unfortunately, he isn't interested in me. Plus, he has a bunch of female friends. Right now, even that Ji Chinxue from the Empire is his VIP." Ling Xingqi said, "He's quite capable." The transit string suddenly changed her words and said, "Big sister, is it possible that you and Ding Meng have become friends?" Ling Xingqi's face darkened. "Why would you think that?" The transit string said seriously, "It's because we sisters are close that I have this idea." Ling Xingqi immediately raised her vigilance. She knew that her third sister was clever and knew a lot of inside information that others didn't know. That was why she asked this question. "I don't have much enmity with Ding Meng. After all, I did kill him once, and he was lucky enough to come back to life. After Dai and him got together, the enmity between us lessened. However, I still have to settle the account with Old Man Wu and the others. Only then can we truly be considered even." The transit string seemed to be relieved. However, the transit string's tone changed again, "But I have to win tomorrow's battle with him." "Okay." The transit string nodded. "Big sister, I can only wish you good luck. You can go back. Don't worry about me. Just tell Dad that I've calmed down and that I'm taking a walk nearby to relax." "Okay." Ling Xingqi had no choice but to turn around and leave. Looking at her tall and graceful back, the transit string sighed inwardly. "Big sister, you've made a wise decision. If you hated Ding Meng to the core like second sister did, I'm afraid it wouldn't be a good thing." At this moment, Jin Xiaoyan appeared by the riverside like a ghost. "Big sister string, there's news from over there." The transit string asked, "Is it good news?" Jin Xiaoyan nodded and said, "Yes, the news has been confirmed. The First Lady, President Lu Ting, and General Howren will be here tomorrow to watch the battle in person." These three were all top nobles of the Federation. The fact that they wanted to watch the battle in person made it clear that they wanted to see the first and last battle tomorrow. In fact, many insiders knew that what these three really wanted to see was definitely the last battle. That was tomorrow's grand finale. Chapter 929. On the 9th day of the carnival, the top 16 of the Fengyan competition had yet to officially begin, but the official announcement stated that the viewership had reached 16.8%. The number of online viewers had exceeded 300 billion, and the number of views on the broadcast had reached 1 trillion. The prize pool of the Phonian competition had also exceeded 2 billion star coins. Perhaps these numbers didn't mean much, but last night when Ding Meng and the others went to the city for supper, they could see the excitement of the competition everywhere. There were advertisements for the carnival everywhere in Blue Polestar City, and everyone was discussing the competition. Even the customers at the barbecue stalls in the underground city were guessing who would be the winner. This event was indeed a celebration for everyone. Ding Meng, Dai Yi, and Junling had also entered the VIP room of the Holy War Temple early to wait. Lan Bing and the others were watching the live broadcast in the conference room of the building. The top 16 matches were held in order, not all at the same time. This allowed everyone to experience the elegance of the various experts one by one. The number of online viewers for the first match had exceeded 2 billion. This was a focal battle. The previous champion, Lei Jingtian, was up against Sheng Hao's Yuming. This Yuming was probably a famous figure in Shanghai. This match was amazing for most of the audience. Both sides attacked each other for more than 20 minutes. During this time, all kinds of gorgeous martial arts dazzled the audience and made them gasp in amazement. However, for Ding Meng, it was very ordinary because the level of Lei Jingtian and Yu Ming were at the level of origin ability users. In other words, the two of them didn't have anything new, such as psychic powers, secret manuals, or the power of the god race and demons. They didn't have these, or rather, they were holding back. If there was anything special, it would be that Lei Jingtian's foundation was very solid. At least, among the experts Ding Meng had seen, this was the most solid. Therefore, Lei Jingtian won the first match by a narrow margin and became the first contestant to enter the top 16. The second match was Isendale against Baiyu from the Apocalypse group. This was another fierce battle. Isendale also used all kinds of martial arts and won by a narrow margin. The third match was Zhong Wuji against Vast Sky. In less than 5 minutes, Vast Sky was defeated. In the fourth match, Junling set the record for this year's Wind and Cloud Gatherings knockout round. He ended the battle in 5 seconds and finished off Dai Liquid with 1 slash. What made people laugh was the fifth match. It was Dai Yi against the eldest son of the Qi family. This young Master Qi was indeed a playboy. After the two of them entered the map, they didn't start fighting. Young Master Playboy just stood on the top of the mountain and bragged. He talked about how beautiful the young ladies were and how beautiful they were. After 5 minutes of bragging, not to mention the hundreds of millions of viewers, even Dai, he couldn't take it anymore. Thus, he took the initiative to start fighting. In the end, the eldest son of the Qi family symbolically resisted for 3 minutes before taking the initiative to admit defeat. This really shocked everyone. The eldest son of the Qi family had a lot of support and was not weak. Even if he was going to lose, he would not take the initiative to surrender. However, this fellow had taken the initiative to surrender. Many of the audience had guessed that the Qi family's eldest young master had taken a liking to Miss Dai Yi. Ding Meng also found it funny. When Dai Yi was sent back, he couldn't help but ask, "This eldest son of the Qi family is not weak. He lost to you on purpose, right?" Dai Yi shook her head and smiled bitterly. "I know he's strong, but he insisted on admitting defeat. He even asked me out for dinner, but I refused." Junling curiously asked, "Why did you refuse?" Dai Yi smiled bitterly. "I told him I had a husband and that we could forget about dinner. He looked very disappointed, but he handed me a business card and said he could cooperate with the Bingyi group." Ding Meng took the crystal card and looked at it. There was a logo on it, Holy Grail Federation Tianheng Group, Vice President Qi Shaoxing. Junling also smiled. Liang Yiran definitely knows this person. He's the young master of the Tianheng Group. His reputation is very good. Ding Meng smiled and said, "It's not a problem to agree to dinner with him. Our group also needs to cooperate with these big financial groups." There was not much suspense in the following matches. In the sixth match, Dream Return easily defeated Jintianyi. In the seventh match, Long Feiyong defeated Lin Song. In the eighth match, Lone Ranger killed Wei Kong. In the ninth match, Official Wuming defeated Misty Rain. In the 10th match, Ouyang Guang eliminated Piccolo. In the 11th match, Ji Chenyu defeated Mu Zhou. In the 12th match, Star Rainbow, Lung Yeqiu defeated Red Moon, Li Xiaoyao. In the 13th match, Scar of Heavens lost to Star Rainbow, Dong Yihan. However, in the 14th match, an upset finally appeared. The seeded player, Blue Moon, fell at the feet of the unseeded player, Neighbor. This match lasted more than 40 minutes. In the 15th match, I Was Born Dry easily defeated I-95-27. After the first 15 matches, it was only 4 in the afternoon. The last match would determine the last place in the top 16. This was also the most important match of the day. Star Rainbow, Ling Xingqi vs. Crazed Explosion. The teleportation light flashed quickly, and the players from both sides entered the map. The match was about to begin. The first thing that caught Ding Meng's eyes was a colorful jungle. He was standing under a giant tree in the depths of the jungle. This was the only open space, and this place was very similar to the camp on Pandora V4. It was obvious that this map was a poisonous planet. What was strange was that the fans in today's live broadcast were unusually quiet. However, the system view showed that the number of viewers for the match had reached 3 billion. Ding Meng could not help but say, "It's a bit quiet." The fans finally responded. "Can it be quiet? 2 billion of the 3 billion viewers are on the other side. The other side has the majority. Boss, you can do it. I just went to Ling Xingqi's live broadcast to take a look. It's so lively there. Aren't you a hardcore fan of our boss? Why are you a traitor on the other side? It's not that. I just want to take a look. I still have faith in our boss." You don't even believe what you're saying, do you? The fans were still arguing. At this moment, Ding Meng could already feel an extremely powerful aura approaching his location. When he turned around, he saw Ling Xingqi. He immediately understood why his live broadcast was so quiet. This time, Ling Xingqi didn't wear any armor. Just this point alone showed that her attainments in martial arts were different from before. At the same time, Ling Xingqi didn't appear with her true appearance. She had made some adjustments to her appearance. First of all, her height had been adjusted from 8 meters to 68 meters. This was the standard height for women in the Federation. Next was her attire. Ling Xingqi wore a khaki-colored lady's windbreaker, casual pants, and high boots. Her figure was just right to be proud of. If he only looked at her attire and not her face, Ding Meng might have thought that she was Lu Qing. As for her facial features, they had been weakened to a certain extent. Those who had seen Ling Xingqi's true appearance before would be able to recognize her at a glance. Those who had not seen Ling Xingqi before would also be attracted by her unique beauty, especially those light blue eyes. They were clear, bright, and without any impurities. When she looked at you, it was as if a beautiful goddess was quietly staring at you. It was as if you were facing a vast blue ocean for the first time. Your heart would be moved. It was obvious that at this moment, the attention of over 1 billion viewers was focused on Ling Xingqi. Her popularity was already very high. In comparison, she was the one who was favored. Even Ding Meng's own fans did not have high hopes for Ding Meng. This was because Ling Xingqi's popularity and aura were just too strong. The system notified that the match had begun. However, neither of them made a move. Instead, they stood there quietly and observed each other. The empty space in the forest was extremely quiet. The fans from all over the world seemed to have quieted down as well. There was an oppressive atmosphere in the air. Everyone knew that this was the calm before the big battle. Long time no see. Ling Xingqi was the first to break the silence. "It has been quite a few years," Ding Meng calmly replied. His own fans went crazy the moment he opened his mouth. F***, boss is boss. He actually knew the goddess before. That's awesome. It seems like I'm full of confidence in boss again. Be more confident. Remove the word seems and again. F***, you're immortals. Be quiet. Ling Xingqi stared at Ding Meng and said, "I'm here to collect my debt." Back on planet Poison Dragon, Ryan, Peng Long, Yao Dao, Wu Cangjin, and the other battle saints of the Starbao group were all killed by Ding Meng. Ling Xingqi had not forgotten about this grudge. However, Ding Meng laughed at this moment. Don't even think about collecting my debt. Even if I win and you're lucky enough to escape, no one will really die here anyway. Both of their live streams exploded again. F*CK. Did this crazy guy defeat the goddess before? Ling Xingqi's expression turned cold. Ding Ming's words were actually a reminder to her. Even if you kill me, I won't really die. What's the point of collecting my debt? If you lose, you should know how big of a loss you'll suffer. Ling Xingqi said calmly. What she said made sense. Although this was not like the previous energy battle, the forces behind each of them had invested a lot of manpower, money, and resources to get to where they were today. If they were really eliminated in the top 16, they would not only lose a lot of popularity, but they would also lose a lot of business profits and a lot of subsequent benefits. This was no different from taking someone's life. Ding Ming laughed. You seem to be very confident. Bring it on then. Ladies first. I'll let you make the first move. Ling Xingqi nodded. Remember what you said. As soon as she finished speaking, her image became slightly blurry. Before the eyes of the fans could catch up, Ling Xingqi was already in front of Ding Ming. She raised her hand and threw an elbow at Ding Ming's chest. Ding Ming stretched out his palm and caught it lightly. With the two of them as the center, an invisible force spread out from the soles of their feet. The surrounding weeds, bushes, and trees were reduced to dust at a speed visible to the naked eye. The only thing that everyone could see was that the wave-like energy had flattened everything within a 1-kilometer radius. As for Ding Ming and Ling Xingqi, everyone could only see their afterimages flashing back and forth. The air crackled one after another, and they were completely unable to see their real bodies. Their speed was so fast that their eyes couldn't keep up with them. More than 1 billion fans started to feel dizzy and nauseous. Many of them gave up on the first-person view and switched to the third-person view. Otherwise, it would not look like they were watching a battle. It would look more like they were flipping through a book. It was very dizzying. Chapter 9:30. The fans didn't get to watch the battle, but that didn't mean that the experts were also dizzy. Dai revealed a surprised expression. Ling Xingqi had used one of the most basic and classic martial arts techniques of the Saint Federation, 7-star punch. As long as one was an origin ability user, almost everyone would be able to learn it. Moreover, this was the martial arts technique she was most proficient in. However, to reach Ling Xingqi's level of proficiency was really too difficult. Dai didn't think that she had such proficiency, so she immediately came to a conclusion. Ling Xingqi was probably testing her husband. Her guess was completely correct. Ling Xingqi was indeed following this train of thought. After the battle on planet Poison Dragon, she had collected a lot of information about Ding Ming's battles and concluded some patterns. She discovered that Ding Ming wasn't someone who was good at attacking. Among the many battles that Ding Ming had fought in, Ding Ming was actually more focused on defense. In other words, Ding Ming's attack methods were relatively simple. Moreover, Ding Ming's greatest characteristic was that he had a very deep energy foundation. His combat strength had reached new heights time and time again. Many people had been directly crushed to death by his huge energy foundation. Thus, Ling Xingqi had used 7-star punch right from the start. Her goal was to wear him down. Now that my foundation is deep, let's see who can wear him down more. Ding Ming didn't counterattack. He just kept blocking. The two of them flashed back and forth, shaking the surrounding vegetation. 5 minutes later, a large open space was formed. After finishing a set of 7-star punches, Ling Xingqi decisively slid back and stood still. Let's end the warm-up here. Ding Ming nodded. He could sense that Ling Xingqi had improved tremendously. She was practically a replica of him. He hadn't made a move just now because he wanted to test the waters. The Starry Rainbow Corporation had found the divine light energy, but what exactly was this energy source? How much energy was there? He wasn't sure. However, he now had a rough idea. Ling Xingqi's Origin Energy Index had reached 25 billion points when she was equipped with battle armor. Now, her Origin Energy Index had exceeded 50 billion points. Xinghong Organization had probably found another large-scale Maoxing ruins. At this time, Ling Xingqi suddenly raised her arms to both sides and opened her palms. One after another, blue ice butterflies continuously emerged from her palms and flew around her body, making her look as beautiful as a fairy. This scene was truly as beautiful as a dream. However, this wasn't the case in Ding Meng's field of vision. Ling Xingqi's origin energy had already begun to circulate. Not only were these butterflies made of ice-type origin energy, but they were also infused with a combination of origin energy, body rigidity, and gravity origin energy. There was even a trace of divine light origin energy in between, which only Ding Meng could sense. Ling Xingqi's wrist suddenly twisted, and all of the ice butterflies immediately combined into a beautiful rope, which whizzed towards Ding Meng. Ding Meng definitely couldn't take it head-on. He pushed his palm forward, and a white origin energy layer appeared in front of him. It vaguely looked like half a shield. Ding, 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 ding. The ice rope whipped the origin energy layer, creating a series of rapid sounds. The origin energy layer didn't break, but Ding Meng was forced to slide backwards. The ground beneath his feet was constantly being blasted apart. The cracks weren't striped, but rather semicircular pits. What kind of skill is this? Liang Yiran was shocked. To be able to force Ding Meng back was already quite strong. Lan Bing stared at the screen and shook her head. Although she was an ice origin energy user, she still couldn't tell. At this moment, Ding Meng had just stood still when the ice rope suddenly split apart like a fairy scattering flowers. The ice butterflies once again filled the sky, forming a spherical force field that surrounded Ding Meng. Ling Xingqi's palms suddenly clapped together. Countless ice butterflies flew towards Ding Meng like arrows, surrounding him. Thousands of rays of light bloomed. Pung! An extremely dazzling blue eye appeared in the center of the empty space. The eye of light was like a confining force field, and it was so hot that it sizzled. It was hard to imagine what kind of attack would occur within it. With a deafening boom, the eye of light disappeared, but a 10-meter-tall icicle drilled out of the ground. The tip of the icicle was as sharp as a sword. At this moment, the audience could clearly see that Ding Meng's shoes had lightly stepped on the tip of the icicle, and his entire body had flipped backwards. The ice butterflies, the rope, and the eye of light were all feints. This icicle was the real killer. Oh my god, so dangerous. Damn, that's so strong. I thought that Ling Xingqi was strong enough, but now it seems that goddess is even stronger. Look at the color of that icicle. It's scary just looking at it. Luckily, Boss dodged it. Boss is mighty. Ding Meng was not mighty at all now. As he fell, he realized that the ice chain formed by the ice butterflies had not disappeared. Instead, it was spreading on the ground like a river. When it saw that he was falling, the ice chain bounced up like a poisonous snake and attacked his back again. This time, there was no room for him to dodge. Ding Meng struck out with his palm, and a fiery red torrent shattered the poisonous snake as easily as crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. The ice chain was not completely destroyed. Instead, it turned into countless flying needles that surrounded him again. This was the pure essence of God's light. In this critical moment, Ding Meng struck out with his palm again. This time, he did not attack. Instead, he opened up the smelting space and directly used the diamond star fusing technique to absorb energy. With a whoosh, a white light rose. Ding Meng felt that his palm was covered with ice needles. At this moment, Ding Meng had just landed when he immediately realized that a whirlwind was blowing toward him from his left wing. It was like a transparent curtain of rain, silently drifting toward him. It was completely silent. Rip! This was the sound of a sharp weapon cutting through flesh. This time, Ding Meng retreated a little slower. His clothes were cut open, and dark red blood seeped out. Ding Meng suddenly felt that the movement of the first 3 points had become sluggish. When he looked up again, he saw the transit string standing 30 meters away. She was dragging a long silver battle sword in her hand. She looked majestic and valiant. The curtain of rain, just now, was Ling Xingqi's 10-direction slash. The wound on his chest was also caused by this slash. He had underestimated his opponent. At this moment, everyone from the Bingy Corporation had a grim expression. Ding Meng had really met his match this time. Meanwhile, in Xinghong's VIP room, Ling Xingwen and the others were beaming with joy. As for Ling Xingqi's live broadcast room, it was boiling with praises. The most ferocious roar was Valkyrie. However, Ling Xingqi herself didn't have any reaction. She knew that Ding Meng's level was far beyond this. Sure enough, in Ling Xingqi's vision, Ding Meng's entire body was burning with origin flames. Ding Meng's aura began to explosively increase. This was Ding Meng's true strength. Ding Meng rushed forward. His entire body drew a beautiful arc in the air. His arm was already raised, and a classic handblade was formed. Ling Xingqi had obviously studied Ding Meng's handblade before. She knew how powerful this move was. She calmly dragged her battle sword, and with dazzling speed, she slashed out several times. A shocking scene appeared. What she slashed out wasn't sword light or source energy. Instead, it was pure white and shiny humanoid figures. These figures were identical to her. Even the battle sword figures were held in the hands of these humanoid figures. Not only were these figures fast, but they also had different postures. It was as if dozens of Ling Xinkis were slashing at Ding Meng one after another. He suddenly lost his voice. This is Shadow of the Soaring Dragon. It was indeed the secret technique, Shadow of the Soaring Dragon. Furthermore, Ling Xingqi herself didn't transform into a humanoid figure. This proved that her realm was already very high. At this moment, more than 1 billion pairs of eyes were fixated on this scene, including the 3 big shots in VIP Room 1. Everyone had the same thought. They could either dodge this crazy person or block it. Ling Xingqi was in control of the situation from beginning to end. However, out of everyone's expectations, the scene of the steel straight man fighting head-on appeared. Ding Meng, who was flying in the air, chopped out with his hand blade. It wasn't a single chop, but a series of hand blade strikes. What he slashed out was also a mirror image of the Origin Energy handblade. It was definitely not as large as the other party's mirror image, but all the mirror images immediately collapsed when they met the saber light. This was clearly using an even more powerful energy to forcefully shatter your fancy things head-on. Ling Xingqi's expression changed because she could sense that Ding Meng's aura had increased by a large amount as he flew through the air. At this moment, all of the humanoid figures shattered, and Ding Meng's final hand blade slashed out. A giant, twisted blade appeared in the air. Its size was comparable to Ling Xingqi's battle sword, and it was blindingly bright. Its momentum was as heavy as Mount Tai. Not good. Ling Xingqi felt a sense of danger. This ball of energy was too powerful. She quickly raised her blade to block it. With a clang, the blade cut into the blade of the battle sword, pushing Ling Xingqi backwards. Boom, 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 boom. Wherever Ling Xingqi retreated, a series of explosions occurred, and the ground was blasted full of holes. She knew that Ding Meng's handblade was powerful, but she didn't think that Ding Meng would have trained this technique to such an unimaginable level. This twisted blade was like a battle hammer. She raised her blade and forcefully slid back more than 50 meters before she was able to stabilize her footing. Just like when she had attacked Ding Meng, she felt a gust of wind behind her as soon as she steadied herself. She was certain that Ding Meng had already circled around behind her. Ling Xingqi didn't even think about it. She pulled out her blade, backhanded it, and stabbed it back. This attack was quite exquisite, as it stabbed back from below her ribs. It was as if Ding Meng had delivered himself to the tip of her blade. Pooh! Everyone heard the sound of the blade piercing flesh, but it wasn't Ding Meng's real body that was broken. This was because behind Ling Xingqi, although Ding Meng's chest had been stabbed, his body was gradually dimming. This was clearly a clone. Ling Xingqi immediately turned into a tornado and floated forward. When she was halfway there, she was surprised to find that 3 identical Ding Meng had appeared in 3 different directions. And this time, they weren't mirror images. These 3 were the real Ding Meng. What was going on? Ling Xingqi didn't have time to think. The 3 Ding Meng had already flown into the air. Their movements were elegant, and they attacked together. This was the real Ding-style handblade. Chapter 9:31. The three Ding Mengs attacked at the same time, and three powerful waves of energy squeezed against each other. The air seemed to have been squeezed out of shape, just like ripples on the surface of water. Ling Xingqi held her sword and spun it in all directions. It was the same move as the 10-direction slash, but the difference was that this spin was a real circular blade. The wrists of the three Ding Mengs were all cut off, and the mirror images quickly dimmed and disappeared. Ling Xingqi's heart sank. These three Ding Mengs were actually fake. She could clearly feel that they were Ding Meng's real body, but why were they fake? She didn't know that this was Ding Meng's secret manual, Solitary Serene Lotus Steps. This secret manual had helped him defeat his enemies many times. Since you want to use the secret manual to beat me, then I'll use the secret manual to beat you. A crack seemed to appear in the air, and Ding Meng came out of it. The moment he came out, he was right above Ling Xingqi's head. This was the final chop, and it accurately hit Ling Xingqi's forehead. Boom! A huge sound was heard, and a large amount of light scattered like flowing water. Ling Xingqi was sent flying. Ding Meng's body flashed again, and he was in the air again. He used his leg to sweep through the air, and this time, his leg landed squarely on Ling Xingqi's face. Ling Xingqi was originally sent flying, but this time, she fell back to the ground. It was as if she was a cannonball that Ding Meng had sent flying with his leg, causing a cloud of dust to fly up. 666666. 6666. 66666. 6666666. 666. The live broadcast room was filled with comments like this, and the fans were extremely excited. They didn't know that their boss's strength was this strong. At this moment, Ding Meng had already landed on the ground, and he looked coldly at Ling Xingqi. Ling Xingqi's image was completely destroyed by this chop and kick. Her forehead was bruised, and the right side of her face was purple. She didn't even have the image of a goddess anymore. Her fans were also angry and cursing. Goddamned lunatic, don't you know how to be gentle with a woman? 555, my goddess is so pitiful. This is a competition. There's no reason not to use force. Are you a spy? Who are you speaking for? Is it wrong for me to tell the truth? That's right, get the hell out of here. Ling Xingqi, on the other hand, was expressionless. She stood up from a pile of sand and lightly touched her swollen right cheek. She turned her head and spat out a mouthful of bloody sputum. It would be strange if she wasn't angry. Ding Meng was the first person to slap her in the face. Moreover, that kick from Ding Meng earlier had caused her to see stars. Her initial estimation was that Ding Meng's origin ability index had exceeded 80 billion points. If she didn't show her true ability now, she wouldn't be able to fight against Ding Meng. At this moment, Ling Xingqi also strengthened the operation of the origin. Formless origin flames also erupted around her body. The ground was suddenly filled with violent winds, and sand and pebbles were sent flying. Even the audience could see this. Ling Xingqi's golden waves were already fluttering. Clearly, even more powerful energy was gathering. Her expression became even more solemn. With a loud clang, the battle blade transformed into a long blade of light under everyone's gaze. The transit string raised the blade to the sky. Dense and complex runes were faintly flashing on the surface of the blade of light. Ding Meng's heart also sank. The thing he was most worried about had finally happened. Ling Xingqi's battle blade was most likely a true divine light weapon. At the same time, on planet V12, in the command center of the divine aerospace ship, Little Rascal's expression was also ugly. We're in big trouble now. Xiao AI said hesitantly. Is it the great general's blade of destiny? Little Rascal said. We're not inside the map, so we can't sense it. However, from its appearance, I'm afraid it is. Xiao AI's expression also became ugly. If it really is the great general's blade, then we're in big trouble. Let's see how Ding Meng deals with it. As soon as Ling Xingqi's blade of light appeared, Ding Meng immediately felt a strange and powerful pressure from the divine light weapon. It was like an electrified metal spike stabbing into his face. It was sharp, strange, and tyrannical. Right now, the two of them were 200 meters apart. Ling Xingqi gripped the blade with both hands and performed a few elegant sword stances on the spot. Then, she suddenly pulled the blade horizontally. Crash! Countless human-shaped mirror images of Ling Xingqi appeared once again. These were impressively the dragon soars in the sky again. However, they didn't appear one after the other. Instead, they appeared at the same time. They filled the space between heaven and earth, holding blades of light in their hands. Their postures were all different, and it was as if they were a magnificent army. To be honest, even Ding Meng was shocked by this magnificent scene. He didn't expect Ling Xingqi's divine light essence to be combined with the secret manual to reach such a frightening level. The energy gathered by each mirror image was enormous, enough to crush a beginner-level battle saint. With so many mirror images connected together, it was like an army of warriors. Their army was invincible. Who could stand against them? Ling Xingqi pointed her sword forward. Kill! Perhaps at this moment, the whole world was silent. It was so quiet that it was suffocating. There were no bullet screens in the live broadcast room. Everyone was dumbfounded. Hundreds of Ling Xingqi rushed toward Ding Meng like they were covering the sky. This wasn't the pressure of Mount Tai at all. It was as if an army was crossing the border. There was no way for him to dodge. It was best if he didn't even have the thought of dodging. Ding Meng quickly retreated. The first 8 origins revolved rapidly. At the same time, he clasped his palms together, and a rainbow-crowned shield covered with runes appeared on his body. This was also the first time Ding Meng had used his Diamond Star spell to the extreme in a battle. Countless mirror images swept toward him, and the rainbow-crowned shield spun rapidly. The sound of the blades clashing against each other was like pearls falling onto a plate. It was frighteningly dense, and many viewers even covered their ears. It made sense for Ding Meng to dodge the attacks while retreating. He definitely couldn't let this frightening killing array surround him all at once. He had to wear down Ling Xingqi's attack bit by bit. In the eyes of the audience, it was like countless snowflakes of blades were chasing after Ding Meng. The color of the shield was constantly weakening, and its quality was decreasing. Ding Meng obviously wouldn't be able to hold on for long. After about 5 minutes, the surroundings gradually changed. Ding Meng had already retreated from the dense forest. Behind him was an endless sea, and in the middle of the sea, there were several scouting ships. Ding Meng leaped into the air and landed on the top of the ship. Several mirror images immediately followed him. Boom! The scouting ships were all blown to pieces. The shield on Ding Meng's body had completely disappeared. He continuously moved around the scouting ships. It wasn't until 7 ships had been blown up that Ling Xingqi's attack was completely worn down. Piles of metal wreckage floated on the beach, drifting with the waves. Damn, is the Starbow goddess really that invincible? Too bad she's uncultured. She can only F***CK the world. Who was shouting F***CK the world just now? Where's the guy who keeps shouting 666? Come out and say a few words. Boss is still awesome. He managed to hold on until now. Far away from the beach, Ling Xingqi appeared on a huge rock. She didn't chase after him this time. Although she walked slowly with her blade in hand, she had regained her usual calm and confident demeanor. It was obvious that her attack just now had forced Ding Meng to retreat 5 kilometers in a panic. This had allowed her to regain her confidence. With her blade in hand, she strolled leisurely. At this moment, she had become the high and mighty Valkyrie. Everything was under her control. Ding Meng couldn't escape. On the other side of the beach, Ding Meng stood in the middle of a pile of debris. His gaze was slightly complicated. Ling Xingqi had already exceeded his expectations. Her origin ability index was now above 100 billion points. This was no longer within the range of a Valkyrie, but an interstellar martial artist. Ding Meng's current problem was that he didn't have any divine light equipment. That pile of equipment was all in the hands of Little Rascal and the others, so he didn't have any divine light skills to deal with Ling Xingqi. Moreover, Ding Meng didn't want to use AIG's ability. Under the watchful eyes of so many demons, It was inevitable that they would be discovered. Ling Xingqi didn't stay on the rock for too long. She also didn't want to give Ding Meng any chance to breathe. She raised her blade and rushed forward. After Ling Xingqi's energy leap, the momentum of her charge was also quite exaggerated. Previously, the two of them had been flashing here and there, leaving behind afterimages. However, Ling Xingqi's charge was now like a shining comet smashing down. Sweep, raise your hand, slash forward. This was a very direct and pure slash. There was nothing fancy about it. It was just a simple slash. However, this slash already contained all kinds of changes. Ding Meng knew his stuff. He could see that Ling Xingqi's mastery of the blade was very high. When this slash came, even if he didn't want to retreat, he would have to. Who would have thought that as soon as he moved, his saber style would immediately change? From a forward slash, it quickly changed to a horizontal slash. Not only did this move become fast, it was also extremely coherent. Those saber experts were also amazed. This was a true master of the saber. Martial arts, secret manuals, equipment, energy, these were all conditions to increase one's combat strength. However, the use of the blade was a solid foundation. It required a person to painstakingly practice it over and over again. It required a large amount of actual combat experience. This wasn't something that could be achieved by taking a shortcut. Ling Xingqi's forward slash with her blade was a combination of attack and defense. This would definitely force the opponent to use all his strength to dodge. As expected, Ding Meng saw that her blade was coming at him strangely. He quickly retreated to the side of the sea. However, Ling Xingqi's blade changed again. It went from a slash to a horizontal slash. Ding Meng really couldn't dodge it. He immediately leaned back. The blade of light brushed past his nose. He could already feel that his nose had been scraped. Perhaps only Ding Meng could dodge this slash. If it were anyone else, they would have been cut in half. Even a fan saw it clearly. The moment the blade of light brushed past Ding Meng's nose, the seawater behind Ding Meng was split in half. It cut a 30-meter-long hole in the air. The waves immediately exploded, creating a spectacular splash. Ling Xingqi's third slash missed. The fourth slash changed to a powerful slash. This time, there was no way for him to dodge. Ding Meng, who was in a half-lying position, reacted quickly. His palms pressed down on the blade of the blade. The blade of the blade was less than an inch away from his face. He could directly feel the turbulent, divine light energy on the blade. In front of the screen, Dai Yijuan, Ling Lanbing, and the others all stood up in shock. Before the match, no one would have thought that Ling Xingqi would be able to push Ding Meng to this point. Ling Xingwen, on the other hand, was so excited that she clapped her hands and shouted, "This is the best chance. Kill him." Chapter 932. This was another famous scene of the storm gathering. The sky was clear, the ocean was vast, and the sun was shining down on the beach. Ding Meng maintained the posture of a reclining Buddha, his hands gripping tightly onto the pure white blade. Ling Xingqi swung her blade furiously in the waves. Before the blade landed on Ding Meng's face, it had already cut through the water and evaporated the beach. At this moment, time seemed to have stopped, and the scene seemed to have frozen. Everyone's hearts were in their throats, and many people didn't even dare to look. This scene was too nerve-wracking, and they felt like their hearts were about to explode. Because Ding Meng was supporting himself with one leg, his strength was concentrated on his palm, so his center of gravity was unsteady. Thus, the situation that many people were worried about happened. Ling Xingqi's high boots swept directly at Ding Meng's ankle. Once Ding Meng fell to the ground, everything would be over. Thump. This muffled sound made people's hearts jump, because the high boots had undoubtedly swept Ding Meng's ankle. However, Ding Meng didn't fall, and his body only trembled slightly. Ling Xingqi was also a little surprised. How is this kid's lower body so stable? Whoosh! The high boots swept out again, creating a brilliant splash. The second kick also swept out, but Ding Meng still didn't fall. Upon closer inspection, Ding Meng's sports shoes seemed to have a layer of faintly glowing plating. He had obviously guessed Ling Xingqi's intentions and was already prepared. Of course, an expert like Ling Xingqi wouldn't give you a third chance. The high boots were instantly wrapped in a ball of silver light and mercilessly swept out. This time, you will fall. As soon as the light came into contact with the plating, Ding Meng was swept away like a piece of paper by Ling Xingqi's kick. He tumbled through the air and landed far away. No matter how hostile she was towards Ding Meng before, Ling Xingqi was sincerely impressed by Ding Meng's skill. If you couldn't sweep him with your first kick, that was because he was already prepared for your second kick. The second kick swept across the plating. That was because he deliberately concentrated his origin energy on his ankle, making you mistakenly think that he was going to risk his life to resist. As for the third kick, he didn't want to block it at all. He was waiting for you to release him with this kick. He was risking injury to resolve the crisis in front of him. You, Ling Xingqi, did send Ding Meng flying with a kick, but he used the force of the kick to send himself flying, so your saber couldn't kill him. This kind of resourcefulness, this kind of adaptability, and this kind of strategy could not be achieved by someone who had not experienced countless life and death situations. Only now did Ling Xingqi realize that so many experts had fallen to Ding Meng's hands in the past for no reason at all. However, he had to pay a huge price to take this kick. As Ding Meng was sent flying, Ling Xingqi swung her saber at the seawater. The seawater split open at a speed visible to the naked eye, revealing the dry sand underneath. A formless, transparent energy flowed through the cracks towards Ding Meng. Boom! With a loud explosion, a 20-meter deep hole was immediately blasted open on the beach, and Ding Meng was directly lying in the hole. The split seawater closed up again, and the crater was submerged. Ding Meng was buried underneath. It's over. It's really over this time. 55-55. Is my favorite crazy big brother going to stop in the top 16, just like that? 5-5-5-5-5. Why are you crying? Boss One dies so easily. But he's gone. He's been killed by the explosion. F***CK your mother. The fans wailed, but Ling Xingqi did not move. She knew that Ding Meng would not be killed just like that. However, Ding Meng's aura had weakened by a lot. She was very satisfied with this because she knew that this number one enemy, who was once so strong that the elders of the Ling family despaired, was finally going to die in her hands today. With a splash, Ding Meng came out of the water and stood up shakily. The transparent saber aura that Ling Xingqi had released with her saber had indeed severely injured him. The 8 origin points had all dimmed, and their operating speed had also been halved. You can surrender now. This was what Ding Meng had said to Fong Lin in the previous match. Now, Ling Xingqi decided to return the same words to Ding Meng, so as to avenge Aunt Fong. If you don't take the initiative to surrender, then you'll be humiliated. Now that there are more than 8 billion people watching this match, to be humiliated in front of 8 billion people is too shameful. Ding Meng stood up straight and took a deep breath. Then, a strange smile appeared on his face. You're overthinking it. Ling Xingqi glared at him. Your aura is too weak right now. Do you have to force yourself? Ding Meng shook his head. No, you don't understand, and you won't understand. Ling Xingqi frowned slightly. Ding Meng said seriously, you've only learned the surface. You haven't grasped the true essence. Today, I'll show you what true, unparalleled power is. Ling Xingqi suddenly felt a scorching current rush toward her. The surrounding temperature suddenly rose, and when she looked down, she found that the seawater was emitting dense white steam. Ding Meng's aura was rising rapidly again, and energy was gathering once more. Upon closer inspection, she discovered that this aura wasn't coming from Ding Meng's body. Instead, it was coming from Ding Meng's palm. What was going on? Ling Xingqi immediately raised her guard. What she didn't know was that the butterfly mark on Ding Meng's palm had been activated in the form of a divine light singularity. This was the transfer of spatial refinement to his palm. Although Ding Meng didn't have any divine light weapons, nor did he use any AI-G cultivation methods. He hadn't used the essence of spatial refinement. Now, in order to deal with a powerful opponent like Ling Xingqi, he had no choice but to use it. Ding Ming placed his palms together in front of his chest. Then, he slowly pulled his palms apart as if he was pulling an invisible ball of energy. However, this invisible ball of energy still took shape in the end. All of the screens were once again replaced by a blinding white light. 10 seconds later, the blinding light dissipated. More than 1 billion viewers were shocked to discover that a blade of light had also appeared in Ding Ming's hand. It was the complete opposite of Ling Xingqi's battle blade. This was a short blade, and its entire body was curved in a strange way. Dai, Yi, and the others were immediately excited. This was the enlarged version of the hero's knife. Even Ding Wenhe, who was watching the battle from the research facility, revealed a look of excitement. She knew the meaning of this knife the best. It was the blade of faith that had been passed down through the generations. The hero's knife signified that it was invincible, undefeatable, courageous, and never retreating. In fact, this was also an invisible knife that had been refined from the space, smelting God's light essence. It was not as good as a real God's light weapon, but now that it had taken shape, Ling Xingqi naturally knew what it meant. This meant that the energy within his body had reached a state where it could grow and multiply endlessly. It was enough to support the shape of a knife. This was the realm that all origin ability users dreamed of reaching. Ding Ming had actually kept such a trump card. At this moment, the feeling that Ling Xingqi was most familiar with and most fearful of appeared. Ding Ming's aura began to increase exponentially. All 10 origin points were fully activated. Origin Ability Index, 100 billion points, 120 billion points, 140 billion points, 160 billion points. Finally, it stopped at 200 billion points, and this was even before he used his diamond origin points. Good. I've finally forced you to use all your strength. Ling Xingqi's face was flushed red. It was obvious that she was very excited. Finally, the moment of the final battle had arrived. She wanted to defeat Ding Ming fair and square. She wanted Ding Ming to be convinced. With a walala sound, Ling Xingqi's clothes fluttered. Similarly, a new round of energy was gathering. Her entire body began to emit a strong white light, and in the blink of an eye, she became a person made of light. This was a transformation that would occur to origin ability users after their God's light equipment had been fully activated. Ding Ming had also undergone this transformation before, but Ling Xingqi's person made of light was not a pure human figure. Her entire body was indeed overflowing with white light, but the outline of her face, the lines of her body, and the edges of her clothes could still be vaguely seen. This was like a person in a painting, a goddess drawn with a white pen on black paper. Although it was not vivid, it was beautiful in its own way. Ling Xingqi could be considered to have garnered a lot of attention during the Storm Conference, but in Ding Ming's eyes, Ling Xingqi's Origin Ability Index had also soared all the way to 200 billion points. This meant that she truly had the ability to challenge Ding Ming. Ling Xingqi was in high spirits. She once again raised her sword and pointed it forward. This is true, unparalleled power. Ding Ming did not reply. He casually waved his sword. This was more like the action of pulling out a sword. However, at that moment, Ling Xingqi's consciousness suddenly became a little dazed. This was because Ding Ming had always been known for his masculine style. However, this action of his was so light that it seemed a little feminine. However, now was not the time to think about this. She also did not have anything to worry about. She flew out and directly slashed her sword at Ding Ming. Each slash of her sword was stronger than the previous one. With this slash, the surrounding beach immediately turned into a sandy beach. There was no longer any seawater. The seawater had all evaporated, and the sword was no longer a sword. It was like a river of stars from the ninth heaven that rolled towards Ding Ming. Sand and stones were sent flying along the coastline, and the wind swept away the clouds. This was how magnificent a god's light martial artist was. Ding Ming suddenly flew up and suspended in midair. Then, he gently pulled out his sword. Yes, everyone did not see wrong. This sword was not swung out, but pulled out. It was like a woman pulling away the veil at the head of a bed. The curved, short sword suddenly whooshed out a series of mirror images. It was as if countless crescent moons had formed a huge whirlpool that rolled back towards Ling Xingqi. Ling Xingqi immediately sensed the aura of this energy blade. These crescent moons were faintly discernible. It was as if you were investigating an origin ability user who was stronger than you. The opponent gave you an unfathomable feeling. This was clearly Ding Meng's ultimate move. She could not easily take the risk. Ling Xingqi decisively changed her strategy. She retracted her long sword and quickly spun it, turning it into a disc to block the attack. Ding, ding, ding. A series of rapid sounds rang out. The crescent moons collided with the disc and immediately exploded. It was as if the air was exploding. It was like bubbles bursting, creating a sound similar to a sonic boom. The force, the range, and the sound made people think that a starship would have been shattered if it had been in the middle of the explosion. The most important thing was that this series of crescent moons had actually forced Ling Xingqi, who had taken the initiative to attack, back 100 meters. The distance was not far, but in a battle of this level, even a single step back would mean that one was at a disadvantage. 100 meters away meant that one could only defend. Ling Xingqi was also shocked. She realized that Ding Meng's sword skills seemed to be even more profound because she had never seen such a sword skill before. Chapter 9:33. The two divine light martial artists were facing off against each other under the scorching sun. Ling Xingqi raised her head to look at Ding Meng, who was in the sky. This strange saber technique was secondary. She suddenly realized that Ding Meng's aura was still rising. It wasn't an explosive increase, but a slow increase. However, he was still rising. If this continued, it would be bad. Ling Xingqi gritted her teeth, raised her hand, and slashed out again. This time, it was a direct slash. The saber flew into the air and became several times bigger. It became a blade of light that was more than 20 meters long. It looked more like an ion missile from a starship. If Ding Meng wanted to use the same sword technique as before, he would definitely not be able to block it. As soon as the saber was unleashed, the energy wave alone created a 3-meter-wide crack in the ground. The surrounding seawater receded again. It was obvious that the condensed energy was powerful. Even for the masters of the Federal Empire, it was unprecedentedly strong. While Ling Xingqi was changing her moves, Ding Meng didn't stay idle either. His hand gesture was very strange. He held his right elbow with the back of his left hand and slowly spread his right palm forward. He used a very elegant and very gentle hand gesture to push the scimitar forward. This didn't seem like a man's hand gesture, or more accurately, it didn't match crazy outburst style. However, after the saber left his hand, it expanded several times. In the air, it looked like the sharp teeth of an ancient monster. It also shone brightly and had a shocking aura. The two sabers carried the power and will of their masters. They collided with each other at lightning speed. Bang! A ring of energy burst forth in the air. Even the golden sunlight was refracted and distorted. The wind that was stirred up crushed all the boulders and reefs in the surroundings into fine powder. Such a shocking battle dazzled the eyes of the audience all over the world, causing their hearts to tremble. The long saber struck the curved surface of the saber. The two sabers seemed to be exerting their strength secretly. No one was willing to back down. In fact, they could not back down. In this situation, retreating meant death. Ling Xingqi saw that Ding Meng was still able to block it. She secretly channeled her energy and waved her hand. With her, as the center, 6 identical long sabers appeared around her. The long sabers rose into the air again and sank into the center of the main saber. The blade of light expanded again and directly forced the curved saber to back down. Seeing this, Xiao Ai's face was extremely ugly. I really did not expect her to be the inheritor of the great general. She is standing on the opposite side of us. Little rascal said, but she can't beat Ding Meng. Xiao Ai nodded. Now Ding Meng was using the Ling Xian saber technique of the celestial heaven's gate. It was not that the divine light martial artists could not block this ancient technique. It was Ling Xingqi who could not block it. The reason was simple. She thought that she had exhausted Ding Ming, but in reality, Ding Ming was much stronger than she thought. Last time, when Ding Ming returned from the Steel Main Empire, little rascal sensed that Ding Ming already had the aura of someone from AIG. She guessed that Ding Ming must have had a fortuitous encounter, but it was not convenient to reveal it. Now, that Ling Xingqi had forced him to this point. He could not just give up like this. At this moment, the huge saber was forcing the scimitar back. Ding Ming's hand gesture changed again. It was as if he had pinched out 2 orchid fingers. Then, with a flick of his hand, 2 golden hairpins popped out. The golden hairpins were not big, but they immediately blocked the scimitar's tip and hilt. Ling Xingqi immediately felt it. Ding Ming's aura was rising crazily. She had never dreamed that Ding Ming could still be so tyrannical. She had originally thought that 200 billion points of interstellar martial artists was the limit of this lifetime, but there was someone who could surpass this limit. Even she herself could not believe it, because this had completely exceeded her expectations. When the scimitar blocked the long saber slowly shrank and quickly returned to its normal state. In the end, Ling Xingqi called it back. Ding Ming didn't give chase. He could tell that Ling Xingqi didn't just come into contact with the divine light energy. She had also obtained Mao Xing's inheritance and learned the divine light martial arts. From a certain perspective, Ling Xingqi was the same as him, so he didn't kill her. High up in the sky, Ding Ming calmly said, "Do you understand now?" Ling Xingqi obviously knew what he meant, but she was still not convinced. She had obtained the inheritance of Great General Mao Xing, while Ding Ming had only obtained the inheritance of an ordinary general. Why should she be convinced? To put it bluntly, it was that arrogant attitude that was causing trouble. This was a common problem for many people. They always felt that the unorthodox path could not defeat the orthodox royal family. They always thought that they were better than others, and they always looked down on those who rose up halfway. However, they did not truly understand the meaning of the divine light martial artists, which was to uphold justice, beauty, holiness, and all positive things. If negative emotions took over, then what was the difference between them and the demons? Ling Xingqi also slowly rose up from the ground. This time, she pushed her origin to the limit. With a schwa 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 sound, she slashed out several times in the air. A huge divine light curtain appeared out of nowhere. This transparent wall was like a surging stream of water. All kinds of different runes, images constantly surged and surged. Vaguely, they even formed the shape of a human face. This was a divine light curtain that gathered the characteristics of all types of origin energy. It was still the same sentence. No one should even think about dodging it. Then, she threw her battle blade again. It sank into the center of the divine light curtain. The moment the battle blade passed through the divine light curtain, it immediately transformed into a vast torrent. The torrent surged and constantly changed its shape. It looked like a long sword, a long spear, an icicle, or a bullet. This was her ultimate move, and it was also her final attack. She firmly believed that Ding Ming would not be able to dodge this attack, because no one could dodge this attack. However, after this earth-shattering attack was launched, Ding Ming, who was opposite her, disappeared. The audience all over the world saw an even more shocking scene. In the air, several human figures appeared and disappeared, flickering in and out of existence. They seemed to be a woman wearing a pure white Taoist robe and a pure white veil. Her figure was graceful, and she was extremely charming. She was like a fairy that had descended to the mortal world. What she was waving was not a sword, but a dance. Her postures were all different, and her graceful bearing was endless. Several immortal lights flowed between them. This scene was like a fairy that had descended to the mortal world. It was intoxicating. Even Xiao AI did not know this move. This was the strongest move of his blade technique, Dark Lady of the Nine Heavens. That year, When Yu Xingyang had paid a visit to Ling Yuelon and fought a decisive battle with Long Yao, Ding Ming had been fortunate enough to witness this move. The divine light curtain pressed down on these mirror images. The mirror images disappeared one after another, but in the next moment, the immortal lights behind the divine light curtain flowed and gathered together, transforming into a beautiful figure. She was wearing a white robe, and she was like a fairy. She wore a round hat, and a white veil hung down from the brim of the hat, perfectly covering her face. This was, shockingly, Long Yao's mirror image. Although she had died in battle at the Wei dynasty, her charm and elegance had been restored by Ding Ming. At this moment, Long Yao was, shockingly, a fairy that had descended to the mortal world. When a fairy descends to the mortal world, which mortal would not be stunned by this soul-stirring beauty? Even Ling Xingqi was no exception. She had long been intoxicated by this scene. Everything in front of her was like a paradise, a heavenly paradise. Long Yao held the curved sword in her hand and gently descended. She did not assume any attacking posture, but instead slowly flew towards Ling Xingqi. When she was about to approach her real body, a powerful force released a sharp sword energy, causing the veil covering her face to instantly shatter into pieces. Like a butterfly dancing under the sun, a peerless beauty appeared in front of Ling Xingqi's eyes. In the audience's eyes, the mirror image of the fairy passed through Ling Xingqi's body like a gentle breeze brushing past her body, allowing her to soak in the warmth of the winter sun. At this moment, Long Yao's figure stopped behind Ling Xingqi and once again transformed into Ding Ming's image. Ling Xingqi, on the other hand, transformed into a white light and disappeared. System caption: Crazy explosion wins. There was no cheering in the broadcast room at first. The fans were probably stunned by this unprecedented final attack. Then the audience erupted. Wow, oh my God, this is awesome. Oh my God, I'm not going home. I'm King awesome. I got to watch such a good match. All scum men and scum women stand up. Congratulations, boss, for defeating the hot favorite. Boss is mighty. Boss is awesome. Boss is invincible. Forever, a bucket of paste, eternal bliss, thin, and 7 fields. Crazy explosion boss. Invincible, my idol for life. 666666666666666. In front of the screen, many people's reactions were different. Liang Aran and the others were clapping so hard that their hands were red. Dai, he jumped up from the sofa. He was so excited that he spilled all the drinks on the table. Jun Ling's face was full of envy. Is this the essence of Ling Xian's swordsmanship? I want to learn it. I must learn it. Ding Ming's eyes were red. She had never seen Madame Yu, but she had heard of her tragic past. She had just seen Madame Yu's real face. This was Mr. Yu and Madame Yu's memory. This was not the realm of martial arts, but the remembrance of the past. This was Ding Ming. This was a true victory. In Xing Hong's VIP room, Ling Xingwen was still staring at the screen, muttering, "Impossible, impossible. How is this possible? How can he lose?" Ling Xingqi was also teleported back. She did not look like she had lost her soul. She just stood quietly by the coffee table, deep in thought. As for what she was thinking, no one knew. In VIP room 1, the 3 big shots were nodding and praising each other. Far away in the capital of Saint Splendor, Ling Zhixing, Ling Long, and Ling Tian's faces were pale. This result was something no one had expected. In Xing Hong's office on the top floor of the Frost Building, Transit String quietly turned off the live broadcast. She turned her office chair to face the window, her eyes calm and deep. Beside her, Jean Xiaoyan looked at her with admiration. She really admired Transit String. "Sister String, you made the right bet again." Transit String smiled. "Xiaoyan, you're wrong. This is not the result I wanted." Jean Xiaoyan was stunned. "You want Miss to win?" Ling Xingxian smiled and said, "That's not it. It doesn't matter who wins or loses in the end. What I want is this effect. Both of them have taken out their trump cards. Only then will they be able to catch the attention of others." Jean Xiaoyan thought, "Sister String, you're saying that Ding Ming's next match will be extremely difficult?" Transit String nodded. "If I'm not wrong, Ding Ming will face a strong opponent in the quarterfinals. Chapter 9:34. The battle between Ding Ming and Ling Xingqi was regarded as a classic of the Fengyun Club. The two powerhouses had shown off too many things that had never been seen before, especially Ling Xingqi's holy light canopy and Ding Ming's Chinese fairy flying fairy. They had become the talk of the town. This battle allowed Ding Ming to quickly rise to the top 10 of the popularity ranking. Currently, his popularity was at 600 million, which was almost twice as high as before. He was one of the most popular contestants among the audience. Now that the top 16 matches were over, the top 8 matches were about to begin. The matchups were also announced by the system that night. Match 1, Lei Jingtian vs. Zhong Wuji. Match 2, Rainbow, Isendale vs. Starbao Dong Yihan. Match 3, Neil for Lousy vs. Starbao, Lung Yechiu. Match 4, Bing Yidai, EVS Long Feiyong. Match 5, Beidou, Jichenu vs. Online Neighbor 99999. Match 6, Official Wooming vs. Born to Dry. Match 7, Ouyang Wang vs. Dream Back. Match 8, Crazy Explosion vs. Lone Ranger. After entering the top 16, none of the remaining contestants were weak in the eyes of the public. Every one of them was an all-powerful expert. The most popular contestants were Lei Jingtian, Neil for Lousy, Ji Chinyu, and Crazy Explosion. These four were regarded as the most popular contestants to win the championship. At this moment, in the private room of the Bingyi building, Ding Ming exited the censor cabin and was about to go downstairs to the food street. Suddenly, his wrist device vibrated. This was a communication signal from the positioning chip of the Divine Aerospace ship. After the remote instant communication was turned on, Little Rascal's image appeared in the room. It was already so late, so Little Rascal must have something to discuss. So, Ding Ming went straight to the point. Is it information about Ling Xingqi? Little Rascal nodded. Ling Xingqi's longsword is actually a divine light weapon. Its name is Blade of Destiny. It is the weapon of General Miao Xing Jiaowu. It was once certified by the royal family. Ding Ming frowned. Another general? Little Rascal said. This general is the one with the most authority. Even General Gong Wang and General Xinglan can't compare to him. I can foresee that Ling Xingqi received the inheritance of General Jiaowu. Ling Xingqi came into contact with the divine light martial arts a bit later than you, so she didn't learn much. Furthermore, her energy is far inferior to yours. If the conditions were the same, it would be difficult for you to win against her. Ding Ming nodded. I see. Little Rascal said, if what hidden front number 2, an ugly woman, said is true, then General Ma Jiaowu is one of the 5 people in Mao Xing, and we are one of them. Ding Ming said, Little Rascal, I suddenly remember. An ugly woman said that you are a fake princess and that the real princess is someone else. Little Rascal said, what she said makes sense, but it's not the most accurate. The real princess is indeed someone else. Ding Ming was surprised. Oh, Little Rascal said, the real princess, she said, is the one who is going to ascend the throne, Princess Jiang. Ding Ming asked curiously, then what about you? Little Rascal smiled bitterly. I'm also a princess, but I don't have as much authority as she does. Ding Ming said, so 3 of Mao Xing's 5 factions have been discovered. Little Rascal said seriously, that's why I came to find you. Since Ling Xingqi received the inheritance of General Jiaowu, she must have related information. I hope you can contact her and find out some useful information. Ding Ming also smiled bitterly. I'm afraid that will depend on luck. The Star Rainbow Corporation was already at odds with him, and now that he had eliminated Ling Xingqi, the Ling family probably hated him to death. Forget about contacting him. They would probably start fighting whenever they met. Little Rascal said, you can ask the transit string to help you. Ding Ming scratched his head and said, let me think of a way. At this moment, in a beautiful villa in the southern district of Saint Splendor Capital, the transit string and Ling Xingqi were sitting across from each other in a small courtyard. This was the transit string's private residence, and very few people knew about it. Only the transit string and Ling Xingqi had a good relationship, and Ling Xingqi would visit the transit string whenever she was free. The full moon hung high in the sky, and the night was beautiful, but Ling Xingqi's complexion was not very good. She had even drunk a few glasses of strong alcohol. Clearly, her defeat during the day had affected her mood. Big sis, victory and defeat are common in war. Ling Xingqi tried to persuade her. Ling Xingqi nodded and said, I know, but I didn't expect Ding Meng to become so strong. The transit string said, the reason he defeated you is not because he is stronger than you, but because of energy. Ling Xingqi was a bit surprised. You can tell, the transit string's expression did not change. I only analyzed it based on the information I gathered from his fights with our corporation's experts. Ling Xingqi did not say anything and poured herself another glass of alcohol. She did not lose badly against Ding Meng, but Ding Meng's strength made her feel despair because she knew that it would be very difficult to surpass Ding Meng. The transit string seemed to know what she was thinking. If you can find other energy sources, I think it won't be hard for you to surpass Ding Meng. Ling Xingqi's eyes immediately lit up. There are still divine light energy ruins? The transit string shrugged and said, sorry, I don't know the exact location of the corporation's core plan. You know that. Ling Xingqi's eyes dimmed again. The Xinghong Corporation had a core plan for new energy sources in recent years, and this plan was to find the legendary divine light energy. Other than using it for cultivation, the corporation would also develop and use it. Poison Dragon Planet was one of the locations, and Ling Xingqi had been guarding it for many years, but it was taken away by Ding Meng. In recent years, they found another location in Beta's outer region, and that was how Ling Xingqi became today. However, Ling Xingqi did not know if there were other locations in the plan, because the specific location was not in Ling Xingqi's hands, nor was it in the transit string's hands. Instead, it was in the hands of Ling Xingwen. How can second sister be in charge of it alone? The transit string asked calmly. Ling Xingqi suddenly looked up. Little sister, don't you think it's inappropriate to suspect your own family? She was not an idiot, and she knew that the transit string's words had a deeper meaning. The transit string's expression did not change. Did I ask the wrong question? Ling Xingqi fell silent again. Actually, many of the core things of the Xinghong Corporation were in the hands of Ling Xingwen. Others might not understand, but as the eldest daughter, she knew some inside information. Although the Star Rainbow Group was once a first-rate corporation, it could not become a top corporation that could compete with Shanghao. It was not until Ling Zhixing and Zhu Bihua got together that the Star Rainbow Group grew stronger with the support of the Bu family. However, it was only in terms of financial strength. The Xinghong Corporation had always relied on the energy industry to become rich, and the real qualitative improvement in this field was due to the marriage of Ling Zhixing and Gong Ruhong. The Miyagi Corporation's merger into the Xinghong Corporation brought a lot of technology and information, which allowed the Xinghong Corporation to grow stronger. Unfortunately, Gong Ruhong died in an accident, but there were also rumors that Gong Ruhong's death was not an accident, but that someone had done something in the dark. The biggest suspect was Zhu Bihua, because of Ling Zhixing's 5 wives. Other than Zhu Bihua, the other 4 all died in accidents. With so many accidents, it was inevitable that people would think that it was not an accident. Of course, Ling Xingqi did not dare talk about this lightly. She knew her mother Zhu Bihua's personality, and the Bu family was very powerful, so some words could cause trouble. Ling Xingqi carefully said, "Little sister, I also have a question. Did Auntie really die in an accident?" The transit string put down the wine glass and stared at her. It was an accident. Ling Xingqi sighed in relief. The transit string suddenly said, "But it wasn't an accident." Ling Xingqi was stunned. The transit string waved her hand. "I don't want to talk about the past anymore. I just want to ask, how did second sister get hold of that information?" Ling Xingqi immediately understood. Ling Xingwen probably still had information about the Shanguang energy site, but Xinhong no longer had any plans to develop it. This made her feel very conflicted. The transit string said, "Big sister, you can misinterpret my meaning. I'm talking about our Xinhong development plan. Where did you get that information from?" Ling Xingqi finally understood. The information Ling Xingwen had wasn't something that she could know, but something that her parents had given to her. Actually, to be more specific, Ling Zhixing and Zhu Bihua were both at the top of the hierarchy, so it was normal for them to have access to some unknown information. However, Ling Zhixing's authority in the Ling family was not that big anymore. This was especially true after the battle on the Poison Dragon Star, where most of the Ling family's top experts had died at the hands of Ding Ming. This caused Zhu Bihua's authority to increase, and in reality, it meant that the Bu family was now the mastermind behind Xinhong. The reason why Zhu Bihua doted on Ling Xingwen so much was because Ling Xingwen had been quite talented since she was young. However, the more important reason was that Ling Xingwen had always been on her mother's side. Meanwhile, the transit string had always been at odds with Zhu Bihua. Ling Xingqi was more inclined toward her father, Ling Zhixing. After thinking this through, Ling Xingqi finally understood the transit string's intentions. The transit string definitely didn't want Ling Xingwen to be in charge of Xinhong Corporation in the future. The transit string changed her words again. "Big sister, actually, you were eliminated by Ding Meng today. This isn't a bad thing. Why is that?" Ling Xingqi was curious. The transit string said, "I can only tell you that it's actually a good thing that you were eliminated by him. Ding Meng isn't an enemy, and you'll find that you'll reap a lot of benefits from your battle with him." These words were very difficult to understand, but Ling Xingqi believed in one thing. Her little sister's judgment had always been very accurate, and she rarely made mistakes in her judgment, not even once. At this moment, Ling Xingqi's wristwatch vibrated slightly. There were very few people who knew about her private communication channel. So who could it be in the middle of the night? The communication channel wasn't a real-time image, but a text message. "Please come to my home tomorrow morning to watch the Storm Meetings quarterfinals." The transit string smiled and said, "See, I wasn't wrong, right? Isn't this good news?" Ling Xingqi was surprised. "Are you sure this is good news?" The transit string smiled even more happily. "Of course it is, but I'm more curious about who invited you." Ling Xingqi showed her the wristwatch and saw that the person who left the message was Soma. This was actually an invitation from Madam President. Chapter 9:35. The president's private residence was also located in the southern part of Saint Splendor City. Ling Xingqi actually knew the addresses of the top nobles of the Federation, but President Bai Xingfei had never had any contact with the Xinhong Corporation. She couldn't understand why the president's wife would suddenly send such a personal invitation. Since it was an invitation from the president, Ling Xingqi didn't dare to delay. She started dressing up at 7 in the morning, then picked out a few boxes of top-grade nuts from the Norse Empire from home as gifts before visiting. The president's residence was also a villa, but this villa was different from ordinary villas. It was actually a high-tech military fortress. Only the buildings that were exposed above ground looked like an antique courtyard. This was also to ensure the president's safety. Bai Xingfei had been the president of the Federation for several consecutive terms, and he was one of the most popular leaders among the people. The president himself was usually very busy and rarely stayed at home. So when Ling Xingqi arrived, only Soma was watering the flowers in the garden alone. This president's wife was elegant and dignified. Although she was already over 100 years old, she still maintained her youthful beauty, like a wise and virtuous wife. However, if you really thought so, you were wrong. Ling Xingqi knew that Madame Soma came from the Federation's Rabbit family, which was in existence on par with the Bu family. Madame Soma herself was a top-notch expert who hid her strength well. During the Devouring Realm War 100 years ago, Madame Soma was already a high-level combat monarch. She followed the family's army to the front lines and heavily injured the immortal Elemental King. Madame Soma had made an outstanding contribution, and her current level was unknown. Seeing Ling Xingqi arrive, Soma greeted her warmly. "Xingqi, over here, come quickly." Ling Xingqi felt a little awkward. She was too tall, at a full 182 meters. She was even taller than the average Federation woman. She usually wore an armored battle suit, but since she was visiting today, she had even changed into an off-the-shoulder dress. She looked beautiful from afar, but when she walked in front of the madam, she wanted to bend down and lower her head, but she felt awkward. Soma smiled. "You child, why did you bring a gift?" Ling Xingqi said awkwardly. "Madam, I came in a hurry. I really don't have anything good to give you." Suan Mansha looked at her with a gentle gaze. "I even hugged you when you were 1 month old. The last time I saw you was half a century ago. I went to the competition venue yesterday and didn't think that you had changed much. Today, I realized that you've grown so much." Ling Xingqi hurriedly said, "Madam, I've embarrassed myself in front of you. When I was young, in order to awaken as soon as possible, Mother made me take a lot of male enhancement drugs. That's why my development was a little fast. However, I awakened early and managed to control it in time." Soman Shah smiled and said, "All right, let's talk inside. The quarterfinals are about to start." The president's private residence was very ordinary, just like most ordinary families in the Federation. It didn't have any luxurious decorations or expensive facilities. If there was anything expensive, it would be the wooden coffee table in the middle of the living room. It was a gift from the previous head of state of the Norse Empire. It was made of the best wood of the empire, so it was naturally very valuable. The AI was naturally placed on the coffee table, and the live broadcast screen had already been raised. Star Wars City was filled with people. The AI butler had already delivered fruits and drinks. Suan Mansha sat down on the sofa and said, "Xingqi, make yourself at home. Don't be shy." Ling Xingqi was pondering Suan Mansha's intentions. On the surface, the president's family supported Sheng Hao, Tianheng, and Scarlet Moon. However, in secret, they supported the Ravik family. They weren't enemies with the Starbao Corporation, but they were definitely not allies either. Ling Xingqi didn't know why Madame had invited her. However, Suan Mansha didn't mention this topic and said, "Xingqi, yesterday must have been hard, right?" Ling Xingqi shook her head lightly and said, "Not really. It's normal to win or lose. It's just that I'm not as good as others." Suan Mansha smiled meaningfully and said, "If Ding Meng didn't have that ancient sword technique, he might not have been able to beat you." Ling Xingqi was a little surprised. Madam President knew a lot of inside information and said, "Ancient sword technique?" Suan Mansha nodded and said, "I've heard of this Ding Meng a long time ago. He's one of the best of the new generation of warriors in the Federation. As far as I know, he's also trained in an ancient sword technique. I've seen it before in the front lines of the Empire." Ling Xingqi pondered and said, "Ding Meng is indeed stronger than me." Suan Mansha smiled mysteriously and said, "Actually, both of you are pretty good. You're on par with each other." Ling Xingqi frowned slightly. The person in front of her was the Madam President. She wouldn't talk about trivial things with her. Every word that the Madam President said represented the President's own thoughts to a certain extent. Ling Xingqi took the initiative and said, "Madam, do you have a problem that you need to solve? It's my duty to help you." Suan Mansha laughed and said, "That's not necessary. I asked you to come today because I want to watch the quarterfinals with you." Ling Xingqi would never believe such words. Madam President must have her reasons. Fortunately, the live broadcast had already started. The first round was between Lei Jingtian and Zhong Wuji. This Zhong Wuji had been very good in the previous rounds, but today, he was completely different. He was actually on par with Lei Jingtian. Of course, with Ling Xingqi's eyes, she could tell that the two of them were still at the War God level, which was the limit of Origin ability users. The match was exciting, but it didn't pique her interest. She paid more attention to the second round, which was between Eisendale and Dong Yihan. "You have a good relationship with Dai Dai, right?" Suan Mansha asked. Ling Xingqi didn't intend to hide it. "Yes, I was sent to Old Xia's place to train for a while when I was young. Dai Dai and I are about the same strength, and our friendship is very deep." Suan Mansha smiled and said, "You're still stronger than Dai Dai." Although Dai Dai has the divine light energy, she doesn't have any equipment or martial arts. This time, it was Ling Xingqi's turn to be surprised. Madame knew about these things from the Mao Xing civilization. Suo Mansha sighed again and said, Old Xia's great-granddaughter is really good. She's had a lot of adventures. Ling Xingqi was a bit disdainful. Isendale was forcefully promoted by Ding Meng, right? She, on the other hand, had a lot of adventures and hard work. The second round wasn't surprising, and Isendale won. The third round was very short. It only took 5 minutes for Neil to take care of Long Yechiu. Suo Mansha looked at the high-spirited Jun Ling on the screen. Ding Meng is also a good person. This Jun Ling is like you, a true divine light warrior. She's more well-rounded than you and Ding Meng, and she hasn't shown her true strength yet. As expected of Madam President, she even knew this information. Next was the fourth round, which was between Dai Yi and Long Feiyang. The accident also happened at this time. Dai Yi, who had been very popular, was eliminated by Long Feiyang. Suo Mansha explained, this is the only contestant from the Xinhong group who is still in the Wind Cloud Gathering, right? Ling Xingqi was secretly shocked. This Long Feiyang was Ling Zhixing's bodyguard. In name, he was a bodyguard, but in reality, he was Ling Long, an elder of the Ling family. Ling Long also obtained the divine light energy and broke through, so he had a much deeper foundation than Ling Xingqi. However, the Ling family's biggest hope was still on Ling Xingqi, but she met Ding Meng too early. Suo Mansha said, actually, Long Feiyang couldn't have gone far. Ling Xingqi said why. Suo Mansha looked at her meaningfully. You should know the reason. Ling Xingqi understood. General Zhou Wu's inheritance was given to her, while Ling Long only obtained a portion of the divine light energy. The difference between the energy and the inheritance was huge. The fifth and sixth rounds didn't have much suspense. Ji Chenyu and Guan Wuming won, respectively. However, the seventh round gave birth to a famous scene. Dream Return and Ouyang Guang fought fiercely for a full hour before the outcome was decided. Dream Return won by a narrow margin. This was a bit surprising because all the experts of the Shanghao group had been eliminated. The time was 12 noon, and the final battle of the top 8 was finally ushered in. The favorite to win the championship, Crazy Explosion, was going against Lone Ranger. The map was not unfamiliar to many experts. It was a vast wasteland, and the ground was covered with smooth and neat boulders. In the center of the wasteland, 16 huge pillars formed a circle. Each pillar was faintly glowing, and in the middle of the circle was a huge pool. The pool was surging with rainbow-colored light. This was the Demon Lake of the Devouring World. However, the Demon Lake was huge. Its diameter was at least 300 meters, and each pillar was 40 meters tall. Perhaps only the Kiki server could simulate a demon lake of such a large scale. After uploading the map, Ding Meng routinely checked the data. The current online audience was as many as 8 billion, and his popularity was at 880 million. Naturally, the live broadcast room was cheering. Boss is here. Everyone, stand up and welcome the return of the king. Boss, can you roll over to me? I'm very lucky today, and I can bring you good luck. Do you think Boss needs your luck? Go away and play with your eggs. Boss will definitely win today. That Lone Ranger surrendered in front of Boss. Playful Blue Moon, I guess you haven't played the new version before. What do you mean by that? Hello everyone, I'm Dreg Hui. If you're my brother, come and bite me. 66666. Ding Meng soon saw Lone Ranger. In the desert, Lone Ranger was still dressed in black, and there was still a long sword and a black scabbard at his waist. Moreover, it was currently night, so Lone Ranger looked like a ghost in the darkness. In just a few steps, he had arrived at the lakeside. Lone Ranger was the first to speak. We meet again. Ding Meng sized up the other party. Lone Ranger's current aura was at the level of a war god. He had 5 different origin abilities: light speed, biochemistry, gravity, mutation, and body hardening. Ding Meng couldn't help but be a little surprised. Hello. Unlike the last time, Lone Ranger's eyes were bright. This is the 3rd time we've met. Ding Meng knew in his heart that after the battle with Ling Xingqi yesterday, many people must have found out his true identity. And with Lone Ranger's words, it proved that Lone Ranger was indeed Guan Xingqing's young bodyguard. Lone Ranger continued, "Someone has a message for you." Ding Meng said, "Please speak. They hope that if you have time, you could go back and visit the old man. He's very bored by himself, and he has to chant scriptures and worship Buddha every day. This is what the young miss asked me to tell you." The person who had asked for the message was clearly Angel. She meant that if he had time, he should go to the Empire to visit Guan Lin's mother, Long Lin. Ding Meng nodded. "I will." Lone Ranger didn't waste any more words. He cupped his hands and said, "Please." Chapter 9:36. Lone Star was shouting, "Please," but Ding Meng did not move. He did not seem to have any intention of making a move. Actually, this was also a form of psychological warfare between experts. Ding Meng's victory over Ling Xingqi yesterday was too sensational. Now, in everyone's eyes, Ding Meng was the new favorite to win the championship. Lone Star, on the other hand, did not have any impressive battle results, so he was fighting as a challenger. Actually, Lone Star himself knew that it would be very difficult for him to defeat Ding Meng. However, it was not impossible. He had been conserving his strength until now in order to find a worthy opponent. Now, the opportunity had come. Under the night sky, Solitary Walker seemed to have merged with the darkness of the night. All of a sudden, he disappeared without a trace, after which Ding Meng moved slightly to the side. A cold light flashed past, and Solitary Walker appeared 20 meters behind Ding Meng. No one in the audience could figure out what was going on. Lone Star disappeared again. Another cold light flashed through the night, and Lone Star appeared in his original position again. Ding Meng's figure seemed to sway a little before he returned to his original position. Since this was a live broadcast, the ordinary audience could only see the changes in the image. However, the experts could not sense the energy fluctuations within the map, so no one knew what was going on. However, Ding Meng had a serious expression on his face. Although Lone Star was a light speed user, he did not use any martial arts techniques just now. He just used his speed and appeared in front of Ding Meng in a flash. Ding Meng had seen many speed-type experts, but he was the only one who could be as fast as Lone Star. Moreover, Lone Star's fastest speed was not his footwork, but his sword-drawing speed. He did not draw his sword easily. He only drew his sword when he was right in front of Ding Meng. He drew his sword and sliced through the air, returning it to its scabbard if he missed. To be honest, among all the martial artists that Ding Meng had seen who practiced the sword, Lone Ranger's sword-drawing speed was the fastest. Even Hidden Front number 2, an ugly woman, could not compare with him. His sword-drawing speed was not a big deal. What was truly amazing was his sword-drawing speed, because that was the realm of being able to draw and release freely. Ding Meng's expression was ugly, but Du Xing's expression was even uglier. He had underestimated Ding Meng. Ding Meng had actually dodged 2 of his sword attacks consecutively. Others might not know how powerful Ding Meng was, but he knew very well. So far, there were only 2 people who could dodge his 2 sword attacks consecutively. One was his master, Long Yu, who was also known as Guan Wuming. The other was the crazy Ding Meng in front of him, who was also known as the God of War. Du Xing placed his sword horizontally across his chest and slowly pulled out his ancient sword. This action meant that he was going to face Ding Meng directly. Suddenly, 2 rays of light, one red and one blue, alternated on the blade of the long sword. Du Xing swung his sword backward, and a disc-shaped sword image that was also flickering with red and blue light immediately flew out from the blade of the sword. What was strange was that other people's sword chi and saber chi were all attacking at the speed of lightning, but Du Xing's sword chi was unbelievably slow. It was like a frisbee, floating slowly towards Ding Meng at the speed of a slow-motion movie. Ding Meng revealed a look of surprise. This Du Xing was actually a ruthless person who cultivated in all elements. The frisbee condensed a large amount of ice element, heat element, and gravitational element origin energy. It first lowered the surrounding temperature, then increased the gravitational force on the ground. This way, Ding Meng's speed and movements would both be slowed down. Sure enough, Du Xing leapt into the air and flew towards Ding Meng with his sword. This kind of flying sword attack was only used when the strong were fighting against the weak, but Du Xing had done it anyway. It could be said that he was bold because of his skill. As this sword flew towards him, Ding Meng suddenly felt his breathing become sluggish. Du Xing was not like Ling Xingqi, who moved with great momentum, but his seemingly ordinary sword style was actually quite lethal. Ding Meng leaned backwards, and the long sword brushed past the tip of his nose. However, Ding Meng did not stand up straight. This was because Du Xing had one hand on the ground as he quickly turned around. Just a moment ago, he was like an eagle soaring through the sky, but now he was like a carp gliding through the water. Ding Meng was shocked. His body quickly turned sideways, and Du Xing stuck close to the ground as he swam under Ding Meng's body. Tee, bang, two completely different sounds rang out. The audience focused their eyes and saw that Ding Meng's left arm had been slashed open with a bloody wound, while Du Xing rolled on the ground a few times before standing up. Ling Xingqi, on the other hand, had seen it very clearly. At the same time that Du Xing's sword had struck Ding Meng, his abdomen had also been hit by Ding Meng's palm. It seemed like Ding Meng was at a disadvantage, but in reality, Du Xing was probably at a disadvantage. Her guess was not wrong. At this moment, Du Xing stood up again, and his abdomen was slightly trembling. Ding Meng's palm strike had caused the origin energy in his body to become extremely chaotic. The flying disc slowly moved to Ding Meng's area, but at this time Ding Meng had already retreated to the side of a huge pillar by the lake. Just admit defeat. You're not his opponent. A voice suddenly rang out in Du Xing's mind. This was the guidance that Long Yu had given him last night in the hotel room. Du Xing had absolute faith in this master of his. Du Xing was not like other people. As the bodyguards of the government officials, he and Long Yu had developed a style of stopping when they made a move. This meant that as long as they made a move, they would either subdue the opponent or figure out the opponent's background. The moment the fight began, they would know the outcome. Now that he had been unable to deal with Ding Meng after a few consecutive strikes, Du Xing began to hesitate. The map in front of him was advantageous to him. Should he give it a try? However, at this moment, Ding Meng did not give him any time to think. Ding Meng's palms were clasped together, and he slowly stretched them out in the air. A large ball of light appeared in his palms. The fans immediately cheered. Was this the reappearance of that origin energy scimitar? Even Ling Xingqi was a little excited. Let's see how you, Du Xing, deal with Ding Meng's peerless scimitar. Du Xing was also a little nervous. He had witnessed yesterday's competition. The thing that he feared the most was Ding Meng's Ling Xian blade technique. He did not know how to deal with it. However, after a burst of bright light, everyone's jaw dropped. The scimitar did not materialize. Instead, it was replaced by a long sword that shone with cold light. What was Crazy Explosion thinking? Why didn't he use the scimitar from yesterday and instead used a long sword? What was he trying to do? In fact, many people had already guessed it. Du Xing's sword technique was not bad, but Crazy Explosion wanted to use the sword technique that he was best at to deal with him. Swoosh! Ding Meng's body flashed, and a shadow flashed past. He stabbed his sword straight at Du Xing. This was the sword technique that Master Zhao Yu taught him. It was a straight stab, simple and pure, without any other tricks. Du Xing immediately felt that Ding Meng's sword technique was not below his own. Moreover, this sword was too sudden. Ding Meng had just flown out, but the sword was already in front of him. Du Xing didn't have time to think. He raised his sword and swung it. With a loud clang, Ding Meng's light sword didn't even tremble in the slightest, let alone being split apart. The tip of the sword was already right in front of Du Xing's eyes. The dense sword chi was like a needle scraping against his eyes. Du Xing was shocked and quickly retreated. Ding Meng's sword form changed again. Her light sword spun out with swooshing sounds, turning into a circular plate that slashed toward her opponent. Du Xing immediately changed his direction and retreated towards the lake. At the same time, he waved his sword and knocked against the round plate. However, it was useless. The round plate chased after him relentlessly. So on Mansha's side, this Ding Meng is full of surprises. I wonder how many things he hasn't used yet. Ling Xingqi nodded in agreement. Not only is his sword technique outstanding, his sword technique is also top-notch. At this moment, Du Xing had retreated to the lakeside and had nowhere else to go. He gritted his teeth and tapped the water with the tip of his foot. His entire body glided across the water as if he was using flying on grass. F***CK, this guy even knows Qinggong. Qinggong my ass. He's a light speed user. His movement technique has already reached the peak. T. This is completely against the principles of science. Your IQ is at the level of a second grader, right? How did you know? My IQ was indeed tested when I was in the second grade. It's actually best to test your IQ when you're young. Kindergarten is even more scientific. Your brain hasn't even finished developing. You bunch of idiots who have gone astray. 66666. After Du Xing retreated into the lake, Ding Meng's sword technique changed again and again. Both he and his sword spun horizontally across the surface of the lake. Ding, ding, ding. The clashing sounds were endless. This was searching for flowers in the waves from Zhao's lone sword. Teacher Zhao Yu's greatest wish when he was alive was for Ding Meng to bring his sword technique to greater heights. Today, Ding Meng had really done it. On the highest stage of the Fengyan conference, he had shown the entire world what Zhao's lone sword was. Once searching for flowers in the waves was used, not only was the surface of the water cut into pieces, but huge waves were also stirred up. Countless crescent-shaped sword lights flew out in all directions from the waves. The sword lights were like cannonballs, exploding the surrounding pillars and creating a huge hole in the lakeside. Waves more than 10 meters high were also created on the surface of the water. This vaguely formed a thermal force field. Du Xing, who was in the middle of this force field, was naturally very uncomfortable. He slashed out 3 times in a row, and 3 golden walls of holy brilliance immediately appeared on the surface of the water. However, this was completely useless. The moment the walls of holy brilliance came into contact with Ding Meng's light sword, they shattered into countless pieces as brittle as paper. Du Xing immediately sensed that Ding Meng's aura was growing stronger and stronger. The battle had already escalated. Seeing that the water spout was about to engulf him, Du Xing hurriedly dodged once again. His boots stepped on a pillar in the 3 o'clock direction, and then he began to move up the pillar in small steps. He thought that this would be enough to avoid Ding Meng's attacks, but who knew that Ding Meng would be like a slippery fish sticking close to the pillar as he moved up. Searching for flowers in the waves had switched to silver eagle skimming the ground. Of course, this time it was not skimming the ground, but the pillars. However, the effect was the same. In any case, there was no need to think about dodging. If you did, you would die. This time, the light sword was even faster. The tip of the sword was covered in an arc-shaped layer of origin energy. It was obvious that an extremely powerful energy was attached to it. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Wherever the layer of origin energy passed, the pillars would faintly emit a fiery glow. If you were hit by this layer of origin energy, the temperature of several 100,000 degrees would probably be enough to burn you to death. Clang, as Du Xing retreated, he once again brandished his sword, and a colorful shield appeared in front of him. He had no choice but to use this shield to defend himself. When the layer of origin energy collided with the shield, it exploded into pieces. Du Xing's eyes were sharp. He discovered that even though the layer of origin energy and the shield had canceled each other out, Ding Meng himself did not stop. Instead, he continued to fly up with his sword in hand. When faced with such a strange and exquisite sword technique, Du Xing did not dare to parry it. He kicked off the pillar with all his might, and his entire body shot toward the center of the lake once again. Chapter 9, 37. Lone Star jumped to the center of the lake, while Ding Meng rose to the top of the pillar. With his sword in hand, he stood alone at the top, as if the whole world was looking up at him. Ding Meng waved his sword in place. After gathering his energy, he fiercely stabbed down. A classic scene appeared once again. Countless white sword lights appeared in the night sky, like raindrops. The rain of swords lit up the night sky and also shocked everyone's eyes. It was like the vast and endless sea of stars in outer space. Stars fell, and the momentum was magnificent. Compared to when he used it on the expedition, this crossing sword technique was many times more powerful in terms of scale and power. Lone Star was not to be trifled with. In the center of the lake, he used all his strength and slashed out dozens of times. Dozens of holy light walls appeared on the surface of the lake. This time, the wall of holy splendor was even thicker than the previous one. Each side was more than 5 meters thick, and when stacked together, it looked like a golden fortress. Flowing light flowed within it, and runes emerged. It was obviously a consummate skill. Boom! The explosion sounded like a single sound, but in fact, it was caused by the sword rain falling on the holy light walls. It was so dense that it created a prolonged sound. Strong light waves appeared in the air. Energy rippled like water, shaking the ground and mountains. It felt like the whole world was shaking. However, anyone with a discerning eye could see that although solitary traveler's wall of holy splendor was huge and thick, the sword rain was constantly encroaching on it. The thickness of the energy wall was becoming thinner and thinner. Solitary traveler was almost unable to hold on any longer. Even the hand holding his sword was trembling. Samantha sighed. Looks like he's going to lose. Ling Xingqi stared at the screen. Not necessarily. Madam, look at Lone Star's feet. Samantha adjusted the view on the screen and realized that the collision of the two sword rain energy walls in mid-air was indeed brilliant. However, the energy waves caused the 16 giant pillars to faintly change colors. Furthermore, the lake water beneath Lone Ranger's feet did not evaporate. It was also changing colors and was constantly churning. It was as if a pot of boiling water was being boiled. This was the Devil's Lake of the Devourer world. It also contained a huge amount of energy. If there were people from the Devourer world present, the energy waves could be used. Just as she thought about it, the whole screen turned black. Only the explosion of the sword rain hitting the wall could be heard. Something must have happened again. This was a question on everyone's mind. After a while, the scene returned to normal. The wall of holy brilliance was gone, and so were the flying swords that filled the sky. Lone Ranger stood quietly on the surface of the lake with his sword in hand. Ding Meng also stood on top of the pillar and did not continue to attack. Of course, Ding Meng was the only one who knew what had just happened. The soul of Lone Walker's boots had absorbed all the energy waves in the area. The lake was covered in black fog, and a chaotic, violent, and evil aura filled the area. But the process was very short. It turned out that Du Xing was a hidden master of the demons. He activated the origin of the demons in an instant and absorbed the energy of the devouring world. This really surprised Ding Meng. However, he could figure it out. The warriors of the divine light were hidden all over the Federal Empire. So were the warriors of the demons. However, Du Xing hid himself very well. Others could not see his identity through the live broadcast. Only through the aura in the map could they tell that he was a warrior of the demons. This was the ingenious part of the map. Once they started fighting, the energy waves would spread in all directions. The demon lake would be filled with energy, and Du Xing could secretly absorb energy. In other words, Du Xing's cultivation of the demon's martial arts might be different from that of Towering Sky Peak, Black Widow, Lin Fei, General Gong Ping, and Head of State Wen Yang. There was also the Hidden Fronts, an ugly woman too. This was also what gave Ding Meng a headache. The demons had many types of energy, but the divine light only had one type. This Du Xing was not easy to deal with because Ding Meng had already discovered problem. Du Xing quietly hovered in the middle of the lake, but there was no aura on his body. Not to mention origin energy, there was not even a trace of an ordinary person's aura. What was going on? Then, a strange scene finally appeared. Duxing disappeared with a swoosh. This was not transient step or blink. He had truly disappeared. Ding Meng spread out his telekinesis vision, but he could not even catch a glimpse of Du Xing's shadow. The problem was that the system had yet to determine the victor. This meant that Du Xing had not lost and was still in the map. What kind of demon's martial arts was this? About 30 seconds later, Ding Meng, who was on the platform, suddenly dodged. A black shadow accompanied by a cold glint flashed past like a ghost. Before anyone could see what was going on, Ding Meng dodged to the side again, and the black shadow followed by the glint of the sword once more. "This is troublesome," Suo Mansha suddenly said. Ling Xingqi also stared closely at this strange scene. Ding Meng, who was on the platform, constantly flashed here and there, dodging all kinds of cold and fast swords as if he had eyes. Meanwhile, Du Xing's figure would suddenly appear and disappear. Suo Mansha explained, "Demon Sex Shadow Strike." Ling Xingqi asked, "What kind of martial arts technique is that?" Suo Mansha said in a low voice, "It's actually an advanced version of the Demon's Cloak. It blocks all kinds of signal detection within an area, achieving true invisibility." Ling Xingqi immediately understood. Du Xing was a demon's martial artist. After using this martial arts technique, Ding Meng could not detect his movements at all. However, when he was about to launch a sneak attack, he had to reveal his true form, so Ding Meng could detect him. "Unorthodox," Ling Xingqi said in disdain. Suo Mansha stared at the screen. But now, the situation is not in Ding Meng's favor. It was indeed not in his favor. Ding Meng could sense that Du Xing was an omnipresent assassin. He would suddenly appear in all kinds of unexpected places and quickly disappear after launching a sneak attack. At this moment, Ding Meng suddenly jumped up from the platform and dove into the lake. Ling Xingqi frowned. What was he doing? Suo Mansha's eyes flashed. She clearly did not understand Ding Meng's intentions. After Ding Meng dove into the lake, the live broadcast became empty. Both of them had disappeared, and they could only lock onto Ding Meng's third-person perspective. Ding Meng, who was underwater, suddenly raised his arms and opened his palms. A strong light shone from his palms, and the lake water boiled again. The 16 pillars glowed again. Suo Mansha was shocked. He knows the Devouring World's martial arts technique. Ling Xingqi was not surprised. It's rumored that the immortal Element King is close to him. It's normal that he knows this. Ding Meng was indeed activating the Devouring World's sacred lake formation. Soon, the entire place was as bright as day. The lake's surface was surrounded by clouds, and all the light rays formed a rotating Tai Chi 8 trigrams. The light rays illuminated the entire sacred lake. Only then did Ding Meng slowly float to the surface of the water, floating in the center of the lake. Looking at his bright and spirited expression, he seemed to be silently saying, "Come, use whatever moves you have." At this moment, everyone understood that Ding Meng was deliberately waiting for Du Xing to launch a sneak attack. Du Xing's sneak attack arrived very quickly. It was as if he had walked out from another world. He appeared behind Ding Meng like a ghost and stabbed his sword at the back of Ding Meng's head. The sword pierced through Ding Meng's head, but Ding Meng's figure gradually dimmed. Meanwhile, Du Xing's figure, who had pierced through by the sword, also slowly disappeared. Both of their cultivation levels in the light speed system were not weak. Right now, what the audience saw was that Du Xing's sharp sword would pierce through Ding Meng's body in all sorts of ways every 3 seconds. Then, both of their images would disappear at the same time. Du Xing stabbed Ding Meng more than 10 times with his sword. Ding Meng kept getting stabbed and disappearing. There was no sound during the whole fight, but everyone was shocked to the core. Damn, this is even more exciting than watching a movie. Boss keeps getting killed. Damn, those are all clones. I don't know where their real bodies are. If you're my brother, come and bite me. So be it. Scram, does anyone want to eat chicken? Let's team up. Previous poster, 666. This was Du Xing's 20th stab. His sword once again pierced through Ding Meng's shoulder. Just when everyone thought that this was a fake body, a PU sound came from Ding Meng's shoulder. The sword had actually pierced through his body, and blood dripped from the tip of the sword. This stab had actually pierced through Ding Meng's real body, but Ding Meng did not fall. Instead, his whole body trembled, and the sword was knocked back. Du Xing absolutely could not miss this opportunity. He fiercely stabbed his sword again. With a crisp paw sound, Ding Meng actually caught the sword with his bare hands. To be more precise, he was holding it, but traces of blood seeped out from between his fingers. Du Xing was overjoyed. This was his chance to kill Ding Meng. He pushed his origin energy to the limit, and the gleaming sword was quickly enveloped by a black fog. The sword had indeed turned into a demonic sword, and the black fog immediately spread to Ding Meng's arm. At the same time, Ding Meng laughed strangely. "You've been tricked." Du Xing was shocked. He was shocked to discover that Ding Meng's palm had produced a boundless suction force. The demonic sword could not pierce through, and it could not be pulled back. This force was not origin energy, nor was it divine light's energy. It was also demonic qi. This was the energy produced by the demonic lake beneath his feet. Wasn't Ding Meng a divine light cultivator? How could he absorb demonic qi? Had he absorbed the poisonous liquid from the devouring realm's sacred lake? How could he be fine even after being struck? Du Xing had no time to think about these questions because he discovered that all of the origin points had spontaneously begun to spin wildly. All of the energy was wildly pouring outwards, and it was gathering in Ding Meng's hand that was holding the sword. He immediately realized that Ding Meng was absorbing his energy. At this moment, Du Xing did not care about anything else. He quickly let go of his sword and retreated. It was good that he did not retreat. If he retreated, the outcome would be decided. Ding Meng did not chase after him. Instead, he scrutinized the demonic sword. Once a swordsman loses his weapon, he basically has no combat ability. This was Ding Meng's voice, but it was not spoken by one person. Instead, it was spoken by 4 people at the same time. Du Xing turned his head to look. In the middle of the lake, there was a Ding Meng floating. On his left and right, there was another Ding Meng floating. At the top of the giant pillar at 3 o'clock, there was another Ding Meng holding a lightsaber. Why were all 4 Ding Mengs real body? Moreover, the 4 Ding Mengs were all staring at Du Xing. No matter how he moved, their gazes were locked onto him like a radar. Du Xing knew that his demonic shadow strike had been broken by Ding Meng. To be precise, it had lost its effectiveness in front of Ding Meng. Chapter 9:38. On the pillar, Ding Meng raised his sword and pointed it downwards. Once again, he executed the crossing sword technique. A new round of brilliant sword rain appeared in the night sky. The glorious scene of 10,000 swords shooting out at the same time appeared again. This time, Lone Star could neither dodge nor block because the demon sword was in the hands of one of Ding Meng's doppelgangers. The 3 doppelgangers on the lake were all created by solitary lotus steps. "I don't believe it," Lone Star roared. After making a few gestures with his palms, he suddenly struck towards the sky. Clang! This time, the 5-color shield was placed directly on top of his head. It did not even cover his entire body. His goal was simple. He wanted to take on the sword rain head-on. On the pillar, Ding Meng shook his head and said, "It's no use. You will lose without a doubt." After saying that, he jumped. He did not jump down, but flew up into the sky. With a whoosh, he disappeared into the depths of the night sky. What was going on? The audience was really curious. Soon, everyone knew what was going on. Suddenly, there was a sharp whistling sound in the sky. It was as if thousands of soldiers and horses were passing by. The sound was getting closer and closer, and it was also getting louder and louder. Anyone who had experienced being chased by a starship in space would know that when the enemy's powerful weapons system locked onto you. This was the situation. A high-risk energy was about to hit the starship. At this moment, everyone's vision was filled with shock. Amidst the countless swords pouring down in torrents, the mirror image of a gigantic holy sword that reached the sky appeared on the screen. This bright white holy sword was at least 100 meters tall. It appeared almost without warning, and it immediately blinded everyone's titanium alloy eyes. Oh my god, what kind of move is this? Wah, is this an interstellar missile? F asterisk CK. Even an interstellar missile isn't as big as this, right? Oh my god, it's the brothers who are coming to bite you. With so many of them gathered together, let's see if you're scared or not. This was the last move of Zhao's lone sword, man and sword as one. The essence of the sword, the movement of the qi, the dense mist of the body, the unity of heaven and man, the will before the sword, the divine power to break the enemy. Not only did Ding Meng have a deeper understanding of the solitary sword of Zhao, but the sacred sword he created was simply destructive. Perhaps even Mr. Zhao himself did not expect that one day Ding Meng would be able to practice this sword technique to such an unprecedented level. This was the true sword splitting the starry sky, its divine might invincible. Solitary Star's five-colored shield appeared like a small piece of paper before the holy sword. Forget about shattering. The holy sword disappeared without a trace. Not even the white light of death could be seen. Solitary Star's five-colored shield appeared like a small piece of paper before the holy sword. Not to mention shattering, the holy sword disappeared. Even the white light of death could not be seen. The system subtitles immediately appeared. Crazy explosion wins. The livestream room was once again shocked. What the F asterisk CK? Everything was flattened in an unstoppable manner. Who asked you to surrender? Who asked you to act tough? Who asked you to go invisible and launch a sneak attack? Now, I'm going to use my ultimate move to wipe you out. I have a feeling that Ding Meng didn't win by killing his opponent directly, right? Ling Xingqi said thoughtfully. Suo Mansha smiled and said, I think only he knows the reason behind it. This time, she did not guess correctly. In the second half of the match, only one person among the audience could appreciate the subtlety of the battle and understand Ding Meng's thought process. This person was Isendale. Because she had the experience of plundering the devouring world, she knew that Ding Meng had used a lot of the immortal Elemental King's consummate skill. Solitary Star's Devil's Shadow Strike was based on a premise, which was to absorb the power of the Sacred Lake. Who activated the power of the Sacred Lake? It was activated by both Ding Meng and Solitary Star. In other words, Solitary Star would gain more and more of an advantage if they continued to fight normally. And the turning point started when Ding Meng jumped down from the pillar platform. To be precise, Ding Meng used two consummate skills on the pillar platform. The first one was extremely important. If he didn't succeed in using this martial skill, he wouldn't be able to do anything to Du Xing. This consummate skill was Immortal Yuan Dreamland. Just like before they found the immortal Elemental King in the underground ruins of Thousand Sail Star, the illusion that everyone had in the palace was all an illusion. Therefore, Ding Meng jumping off the pillar, jumping into the bottom of the lake, activating the Sacred Lake, and floating to the surface were all illusions. What the audience saw was also an illusion. This was because Ding Meng's real body stayed on the pillar and did not move at all. However, in order to make the illusion more realistic, he used his second skill, the Solitary Lotus Step. Therefore, everyone thought that his real body was Ding Meng in the center of the lake. How was Solitary Star's Devil's Shadow Strike seen through? That is, Ding Meng has used the Serene Dream Projection, which is the nether vision. Although you can be invisible when traveling alone, you have absorbed the power of the Holy Lake. Although telekinesis, vision, and aura perception can't do anything to you, under the gaze of the Serene Dream Projection, your every move has nowhere to hide. Finally, it was Ding Meng's time to perform. He kept letting his doppelgangers take the sword on purpose, giving Solitary Star the illusion that Ding Meng could not see him and could only use his doppelgangers to take the sword. Therefore, when he succeeded many times and suddenly stabbed a real body, Solitary Star would inevitably strengthen his attack. At this time, his Devil Sword would be successfully tricked out. Once the Diamond Star-fusing art absorbed energy, Ding Meng would predict that Solitary Star would let go of the sword. At this time, the ending was determined. It could be said that these thoughts, skills, and tricks were all linked together and impeccable. This was the strategy that Ding Meng had developed in countless battles. This was also why Isendale admired Ding Meng. Even if Solitary Star had some strength, if he wanted to win against someone like Ding Meng, he was still a little lacking. At this moment, the quarterfinals were over. However, today's competition was not over yet, because the top 4 contestants would be decided today. The remaining 8 contestants would start a new round of battles after an hour of rest. The system rematched again, and after 10 minutes, the next round was announced. Round 1, Dream Return vs. Isendale. Round 2, Guan Wuming vs. Long Feiyong. Round 3, Neil Tami vs. Ji Chinyu. Round 4, Lei Jingtian vs. Crazy Explosion. In the Bingyi Group's VIP room, only Ding Meng and Junling were left. Looking at the list of opponents, Ding Meng could not help but smile bitterly. After entering the pinnacle of the competition, the opponents that he met were all very strong. Now, he actually met the legendary Lei Jingtian in the quarterfinals. Sir System really knew how to play. It matched him with such a strong opponent, and he was about to meet him so soon. He did not even have time to prepare. Junling also smiled bitterly. Boss, you won't stop at the quarterfinals, right? Ding Meng's eyelids drooped. You should worry about yourself. You met Wen Yang's fiancé. TSK. Junling shook her head in disdain. I promised Miss Ji before that if I met this Ji Chinyu, I would beat him to death. Ding Meng said. Out of hundreds of millions of contestants, the last 8 contestants basically represent the strongest 8 people in the Federal Empire. If they can make it this far, do you think they're weak? Junling pursed her lips and did not argue. She definitely understood this logic, and she understood it better than most people. Ji Chinyu was not easy to deal with. To be able to marry Wen Yang to Chancellor Ji Chinxue, how could such a person be weak? While they were discussing, Ling Xingqi and Suomansha were also studying the competition schedule. I didn't expect Ding Meng to meet Lei Jingtian so soon. Suomansha's expression was a little regretful. Ling Xingqi was curious. Madam, you seem to be more optimistic about Lei Jingtian? Suomansha nodded. He's a 2-time champion. His record is impressive. If nothing unexpected happens, he might become a 3-time champion. Ling Xingqi did not answer. Although Suomansha's words were not without reason, she was more optimistic about Ding Meng. Ding Meng was always able to surprise people, and Ding Meng was a guy who was good at creating miracles. Suomansha suddenly said, Xingqi, do you have any thoughts of working for the Federation? Ling Xingqi smiled bitterly. Madam, you know that I don't participate much in the management of the company. My 2 little sisters are in charge. As for the official career, I really don't have much interest. Suomansha smiled. I know that you and Dai Dai are the same type. You both admire martial arts and love adventure, but this does not conflict with working for the Federation. Ling Xingqi was curious. Madam, you mean? Suomansha put away her smile and said seriously, I can only tell you this. If you're interested, you will be rewarded. Moreover, this reward will be of great help to you. Although her words were tactful, the meaning was very clear. For an expert like Ling Xingqi, the successor of a large financial group or a high-ranking official of the Federation could not arouse her interest. What she was truly interested in was the Mao Xing civilization's divine light energy, or the higher level of martial arts. Since Samantha was speaking like that, it proved that the so-called reward was definitely related to this aspect. Ling Xingqi was shocked. Could it be that the president also knew about the Mao Xing civilization? Ling Xingqi suddenly felt her heart pounding, but she was still very calm. Madam, if there is such an opportunity, I am willing to give it a try. Suomansha nodded. In the future, you will be very glad that you made the choice you made today. An hour passed very quickly, and the top 4 battle was about to begin. The first battle was between Dream Return and Isendale. This battle lasted for a full hour, and in the end, Isendale unfortunately lost. The audience could not tell, but Ding Meng knew that Nanshuan had the psychic power of transformation. Although Isendale was very strong, it would be very difficult for her to win. The second battle was not suspenseful. After Guan Wuming and Long Feiyong fought fiercely for half an hour, Long Feiyong was eliminated. At this point, all the experts in Shenghao Xinhong were eliminated. At this moment, the third battle had not started, but the official website showed that there were 3.2 billion people online. It was undoubtedly the most watched battle of the Fengyan Convention, because both sides were very popular. Ding Meng even sneaked into Ding Meng's livestream. Junling's popularity was as high as 1 billion. When Ding Meng's crazed ID appeared in the livestream, the fans there were instantly excited. F***CK, am I seeing things? Craze Boss is here. He is here to cheer for Big Sister. F***CK, it really is Craze Boss. He is so sneaky. Boss is mighty, Big Sister is invincible. Kill the opponent, kill that bullsh *T goddess. Yes, that girl loves to show off. Big Sister is good. Evil is good. You need to experience it for 3 minutes. Then you'll be like me, like Big Sister and Boss. F***CK, 666. Chapter 9, 39. When a map for the third round appeared on the screen, it really attracted the attention of all the spectators. The sky was blue, and the sun shone on the verdant mountain range. The mountain range stretched out, reflecting the beautiful scenery of the wilderness. On a vast land, 2 large rivers converged from the east and west into a huge lake. The lake water was clear and blue, and the peach forest by the shore was in full bloom. Countless peach blossoms danced in the wind. This was simply a beautiful picture of fireworks in Yangzhou in March. On the eastern river, an antique pleasure boat appeared. The pleasure boat was 3 stories high, and on the top deck, a stunning beauty dressed in ancient clothing stood at the bow. She bathed in the rain of petals that rose in the wind, as if she was appreciating the infinite beauty of the great rivers and mountains. Her appearance was at least 60% similar to Ji Qinxue. Every frown, every smile, and every movement carried an infinite charm. However, her temperament was completely different from Ji Qinxue. Ji Qinxue was confident, generous, noble, and elegant. Although she was charming enough, her chin was slightly sharp, and her eyebrows were especially sharp. This added a trace of hostility to her face. Although she maintained a smile on her face, Ji Qinxue's smile was very friendly, like the spring breeze in March, making people feel very comfortable. Her smile, on the other hand, was not so natural. It was like a smile that was not a smile, but also like a deliberate fake smile, making people unable to figure it out. However, Ji Qinyu still won a large number of fans in the Federal Empire. There was no other reason. Her beauty, which could cause the downfall of a country, was always a favorite topic of discussion. Moreover, it was usually very difficult for a goddess of this level to appear in the public eye. Once her face was revealed, the degree of shock could be imagined. Unlike her graceful and charming appearance, on the western river, an emerald green bamboo pole flowed down the water. On the bamboo pole stood Junling, who was dressed in black, with only a pair of eyes exposed. Junling crossed her arms and looked around with disdain. A breeze blew, and a cape fluttered in the wind. She was like a peerless expert drifting along the river. In fact, in the eyes of many fans, Junling was the heroine of this year's storm meet. This was because Junling had overcome all difficulties along the way. Basically, she only needed a palm, a punch, or a knife to finish off her opponents. The nickname given to her by the fans was Kneeling Sister, or Sister One Knife. Although Junling's appearance wasn't as graceful as Ji Qinyu's, Junling had a kind of invincible arrogance. At this moment, the sun was shining brightly on the map, but everyone felt cold when they saw Junling. The battle hadn't even begun, but the aura of an expert had already intimidated everyone present. At this moment, the pleasure boat and the bamboo pole had floated into the huge lake. The distance between the two parties was still several hundred meters. Ji Qinyu took the initiative to speak. Her voice was sweet and pleasant to the ears. "She's with you, right?" In front of the screen, Ji Qinxue's face fell. Ji Qinyu was obviously referring to himself. It seemed like Junling's identity had been investigated by the Empire. Junling replied coldly, "Here." Ji Chenyu giggled and said, "Why are you getting more and more timid? You don't even dare to participate in this year's storm meet?" Junling didn't answer. She had never liked to talk nonsense. Ji Chenyu laughed again. "I watched your match. It was very exciting. The longest time was 5 minutes, and the shortest was 5 seconds. You basically finished the battle in one move." Junling said, "So what?" Ji Chenyu laughed happily. "I don't mean anything else. I can let you have 3 moves first." When these words were said, the billions of viewers doubted their ears. "My sister, you can let anyone you want. Even if you let people like Lei Jingtian, Guan Wuming, or Crazy Explosion take 3 moves, it's still fine. But this is Sister Killing Goddess Dao. You dare to let her have 3 moves?" Junling was still cold and expressionless. "Okay." Ji Chenyu gestured across the air. "Please board the boat." When these words were said, the atmosphere suddenly became tense. Everyone in the audience had a feeling that Sister Dao was about to make her move. Sure enough, Junling's boots lightly stepped on the bamboo pole. Like a swallow, she swept across the surface of the lake for hundreds of meters. Then, her toes stepped on the water's surface again. Her entire body swept up at an angle, flying straight toward the 3rd floor of the pleasure boat. To the outside world, this was nothing special. But on the deck, Ji Chenyu immediately felt the strength of this killing god. Her opponent's aura was extremely heavy. It was like an iron wall pressing down on her, making her feel breathless. Halfway through, Junling raised one hand and bent her arm. The standard Ding-style hand knife was already revealed. Then, she quickly chopped down. At this moment, the air seemed to be torn apart. At the same time, the hand knife cut down, creating streak-like energy waves. Like ripples of water, they swept toward Ji Chenyu. In front of the screen, Lan Bing couldn't help but sigh. Little sister's hand knife has already surpassed her master. Ji Chenyu didn't panic. As soon as Junling arrived, she decisively crossed her wrists and quickly blocked her opponent's swift and fierce hand knife. Junling's movements were unusually coherent. After her hand knife was blocked, she used the tiger-rending style to knee Ji Chenyu's towering chest. In this year's storm meet, the female experts still paid more attention to their image. Most of the martial arts and moves they used were methodical. At the very least, their postures were very elegant and their movements were very elegant. There were very few simple and crude fighting styles like Junling's. Moreover, Ji Chenyu's chest was fuller than the average woman's. It was just right for Junling's knee strike. Perhaps Ji Chenyu didn't expect Junling to fight like a ferocious man. She had no choice but to press down with her wrists, pressing down on her opponent's knee. With this press, her chest was protected, but Junling's swooping momentum did not stop. Moreover, Junling's tyrannical brutality was beyond her expectations, because Junling directly stretched out his neck and used his forehead to fiercely hit the other's head. There was a muffled thump. This sound was painful to listen to. Ji Chenyu was caught off guard. Her forehead was hit on the spot, and she immediately fell down. It looked like she fell to the ground, but in fact, she somersaulted several times in a row. She flipped 5 or 6 times in a row before standing still at the cabin door. At this time, a small purple bump had appeared on her forehead. Her expression was extremely ugly. "Ah, you gave my big sister 3 moves. Are you worthy? You've made a fool of yourself this time, haven't you? Ha ha ha. Look at the bump on her head. Do you still dare to act pretentious? Let's do it one by one. Don't spend a cent playing Nanuet with me. Tonight at 8 o'clock. Set off on time. 233333. Ji Chenyu coldly stared at her opponent. Junling's collision just now almost knocked her unconscious. This killing god really lived up to his reputation. His strength was abnormally strong. Junling still didn't have any expression, but he was surprised. This Ji Chenyu's aura was clearly that of a war god. She was knocked away by his head, but this wooden pleasure boat wasn't damaged at all. Could it be that this boat was unbreakable by the system? Her train of thought was exactly the same as Ji Chenyu's. This pleasure boat was an arena. Whoever was knocked down was equivalent to losing half the battle. Therefore, there was still a difference between the thinking of a female expert and a male expert. Women sometimes had to fight for their pride. All of a sudden, Ji Chenyu sprung up from the ground. Her boots were abruptly ignited with a layer of source flame. She launched 6 consecutive kicks at Junling in a parabolic trajectory, forcing him to retreat while parrying the attacks. The moment she landed, the last attack wasn't a bouncing kick, but a very beautiful backflip. This was a whirlwind facing the sky. Her whole body spun several times in the air and continuously swept her feet. Bang! A light sound was heard. Junling was also hit. His chin was hit by the tip of his opponent's boot, and he felt his jaw go numb. Junling's gaze immediately turned cold. She had grown up on Madison and spent most of her life fighting beasts and monsters. Therefore, she had developed a straightforward fighting style. However, after meeting Ding Meng and familiarizing herself with the fighting techniques of origin ability users and psionicis, she gradually changed her style. This was how it was when people fought with people. Often, one had to guess the other's thoughts. Ji Chenyu was smiling now. Obviously, she was responding to her head-butting attack. Now, everyone was even. Ji Chenyu blinked and smiled. "Don't you need your knife?" Junling looked at her coldly. "I don't need it to deal with you." Ji Chenyu smiled, even sweeter. "Do you want to eat another kick?" Junling said, "These fancy things of yours are completely useless." After saying that, she jumped up again. This posture was very strange. Others usually used a kick in the air to sweep away thousands of troops, but this time, she used her foot as a chopping knife and pressed down with the force of splitting Mount Hua. Ji Chenyu found it strange, but she didn't think much about it. She raised her palms and held the opponent's ankles. Junling's aura didn't increase, so Ji Chenyu was confident that the opponent's kick couldn't do anything to her. Soon, she knew that she was wrong, and very wrong. Junling's ankles were held, and her body leaned down. Her whole body actually drilled through Ji Chenyu's gauze skirt and punched Ji Chenyu in the back. Ji Chenyu could only let go of her hand in pain. Once she did, Junling quickly half-knelt and struck with her elbow. Ji Chenyu suddenly scurried forward, and her elbow immediately missed. She thought that the opponent wouldn't follow up, but who knew that Junling didn't even stand up completely. Instead, she pounced toward Ji Chenyu in a more unique way. In the eyes of the audience, Junling's movement was like a four-legged creature crawling on the ground and then pouncing out like a tiger. The movement was a little ugly, but it was swift and fast. Even experts like Ding Meng and the others would find it difficult to dodge. This was because this wasn't the fighting technique of a psionicist. This was the attacking routine of the beasts and monsters on Madison. How many years had Junling and the others been immersed in Madison? They had long integrated the habits and fighting techniques of the beasts into themselves. This pounce indeed caught Ji Chenyu off guard. Junling's movements were very agile. He grabbed Ji Chenyu's slender arm and threw her over his shoulder. Before she landed on the ground, Junling flew upside down. Her whole body stretched out, and in the air, she smashed her elbow into Ji Chenyu's chest. This punch really smashed Ji Chenyu's heart, but looking at Junling's wolf-like posture, Ji Chenyu didn't care about the pain. She rolled on the floor continuously, dodging Junling's open fingers. Her bent fingers were inserted into the wooden plank. Junling's body shrank, and her whole body was like a mole as she scurried toward Ji Chenyu. Her movements weren't fast, but they were accurate and effective. These fighting techniques learned from beasts were applied in actual combat, leaving many close combat experts in the dust. Ji Chenyu didn't even have time to stand up before she was pounced on by Junling again. This scene made it seem as if Junling was an impatient pervert. Seeing a beautiful woman, he would definitely pounce on her. His movements were extremely rough. Ji Chenyu's live broadcast room was silent. All the fans watching were incomparably embarrassed. Was this King's sister Yi Dao still a woman? Did she still have the demeanor of an expert? Chapter 940. In front of Jun Ling, who was an expert in close combat, Ji Chenyu basically had no resistance. She felt that Jun Ling was like an agile leopard, pouncing and hitting, flipping up and down, twisting and turning, using both her head and feet. If Ji Chenyu wasn't thrown out, she would roll on the ground to dodge. In any case, her entire body was being beaten up. After a few more rounds, Ji Chenyu, who had fallen to the ground, couldn't bear it anymore. She slapped the wooden plank with one hand, and her entire body's aura erupted. She flew back lightly, clinging to a flagpole on the top railing. Her current image was terrible. Her nose was bruised, and her face was swollen. She didn't have half the image of the Empire's goddess. It must be known that her main purpose in participating in this wind cloud gathering was to show her face, earn popularity, and build momentum for the future beta group and the wedding of the century. But now she had actually been beaten up by Jun Ling. She was very angry. At this moment, a gust of wind blew. The flower petals on the branches of the lakeside surged up, forming a cyclone that revolved around the pleasure boat. Several seven-colored flags on the boat fluttered in the wind. Under the sunlight, Ji Chenyu waved her hands, and a pair of exquisite and shining tridents appeared in her palms. Her entire person regained that kind of flirtatious expression. On the deck, Jun Ling sneered. Her origin ability also began to increase. Her left hand gently spread out, and the bright and sharp kukri blade whooshed in a circle. Then her palm fiercely clenched, and the blade was immediately grasped tightly. The weapons of these two belonged to the short and powerful category. Many experts could see that the two's moves were definitely strange and exquisite. At least Ji Chenyu had taken this route. She suddenly swept down from the flagpole, and the two tridents seemed to transform into two dancing butterflies, flying up and down around Jun Ling. When the butterflies fluttered in the air, their movements were so romantic and ethereal that it was impossible to guess their flight path. Therefore, in the eyes of the audience, the entire boat was filled with butterflies fluttering in the air and bright lights flashing chaotically. Wherever Ji Chenyu passed, flowers would fall in profusion. The saber light and the lake water reflected each other's splendor, dazzling the audience. Not only was this battle a good sight to behold, it also added a bit of romance to it. Ji Chenyu's attacks were fierce, but Jun Ling also elegantly dodged. The black shadow shuttled back and forth between the flagpoles, flashing here and there. No matter how complicated Ji Chenyu's attacks were, they couldn't touch her. Ji Chenxue, who was in front of the screen, had never seen Jun Ling in action. At this moment, when she saw Jun Ling's movements, she couldn't help but sigh. Dingming's side was really full of experts. This little sister Jun Ling was really too well-rounded. She could attack, defend, resist, and fight. The key was that she was well-versed in all aspects, and her actual combat experience was unparalleled. Ji Chenyu's crazy attacks were fruitless, and Jun Ling seized the opportunity. The two shuttled back and forth like swallows. Jun Ling jumped high from the flagpole and suddenly slashed down with her blade. At this time, Ji Chenyu had just stood on the deck. Jun Ling's blade was a combination of heat, ice, gravity, body hardening, speed of light, mutation, and a trace of divine light energy. It directly chopped down on Ji Chenyu's head. Don't think about dodging. It depends on how you deal with it. Ji Chenyu subconsciously raised her dagger to block. With a dang, the dagger in her left hand immediately fell out of her hand and was directly shaken into the lake. She never thought that Jun Ling's counterattack would be so fierce. This beast's strength was so great. In this crisis, Ji Chenyu once again increased her origin energy. The remaining three-pronged dagger slid up the opponent's blade from the center. When the two blades met, there was a chi sound and a large string of strong electric sparks. Then, with a twist of her wrist, the other two daggers suddenly jammed the battle blade. "You want to play these fancy tricks with me?" Jun Ling's wrist also twisted. Ji Chenyu's face suddenly distorted. Her wrist was actually twisted in the opposite direction, and the tip of the battle blade slashed across her throat. Whether it was strength or skill, Junling was clearly above her, especially this strange left-handed blade. The way and path of the blade were completely different from other blade experts. It was completely a style of its own. The tip of the blade hadn't cut her yet, but the blade's aura was astonishing. Traces of blood had already split open on her white neck. Jichenyu no longer held back. She pushed her origin to the limit. A red light appeared in her palm, and she fiercely pushed it towards the sky. This time, she finally pushed Jichenyu into the air and back to the cabin. With a clang, the sharp cookery blade fell onto the wooden plank. Then, it turned fiery red and finally melted. What was this situation? The audience stared with wide eyes. In fact, the reason was very simple. Junling's cookery blade was brought over from Madison. It was a battle blade made of very ordinary materials. Under the extreme stimulation of Jichenyu's origin energy, it simply couldn't withstand the high temperature and directly melted. She wants to use her origin energy to directly crush him. Jichenyu still understood his sister. She was very competitive. It's a pity that she ran into a tough nut this time. Lan Bing laughed softly. Jichenyu might be able to directly crush people like Dai Yi, Lu Qing, and Su Lingwei, but what kind of cruel and fierce person was her little sister? Seeing this scene, Ling Xingqi could not help but sigh. Another divine light martial artist. Suan Manshao laughed. I think she is very similar to you. It would have been better if she did not say it. Now that she said it, Ling Xingqi felt that it was true. Junling was bloodthirsty, and Ling Xingqi was a martial artist. Both of them were essentially the same. They pursued a higher realm of martial arts. Look at Junling's righteous and decisive stance. Chapter 941. The pleasure boat turned around and flowed into the southern river. Along the way, peach blossom rain swirled and stirred up the sky, but the deck of the pleasure boat was not a picturesque scene. Jichenyu waved her hand again, and a straight black sword appeared in her hand. She directly flew up and swept the sword toward Junling Ding. A long and drawn-out sound of collision rang out. The collision of the sword and the saber burst out a large wave. At this moment, the river surface swayed to both sides with a circle of half-a-meter-high waves. The two of them clung to the flags at the bow and stern of the boat, respectively, staring at each other like tigers watching their prey. Their gazes could not wait to tear each other to pieces. Ding, ding, ding. A series of rapid sounds rang out, and the sound of the swords colliding was incessant. The two figures were like swallows shuttling back and forth among the flags, and their speed was getting faster and faster. At first, people could still see the changes in the moves, but gradually, the sword could not be seen clearly. The sword was like a black dragon churning in the air. Slowly, the saber could not be seen, and it was like a stream of light shuttling back and forth in the peach blossom rain. The audience could only see the figures and faces of the two people, and the people behind could not see them anymore. There were only two mixed black and white lights flying back and forth in the sky. Their people and weapons had merged into one. Wherever their weapons went, they would go. Wherever they went, there would be a dazzling brilliance and a riot of falling petals. Waves of water continued to spread to both sides of the river. The waves scraped the shore and immediately caused a violent explosion. The peach blossom forest, rocks, and sand along the way were all blown up into the sky. It was really flying sand and stones, and the sun and moon did not have any light. The two of them fought for a full 20 minutes before stopping. No one took advantage of the other. Jichenyu landed back on the deck and glared at Junling. She had never imagined that Junling would be so powerful. His aura had not weakened in the slightest, even after being beaten to this extent. However, she herself was somewhat powerless. Junling was also secretly surprised. This delicate woman was quite sturdy. She had actually been attacking him for such a long time and was still unharmed. At this time, Junling keenly noticed that the floating speed of the pleasure boat suddenly increased, and the river seemed to be flowing downwards. After taking a closer look, her face changed. Because 2,000 meters ahead, the river stopped flowing, and there was a row of stone piers on the river surface. There must be a cliff in front of him, and the river was about to form a waterfall. Junling's fighting habits since he was young made him pay special attention to the terrain. Sure enough, it fell with the stern down and the bow down. Ji Chenyu was overjoyed. If we were to die, you would die first. In the end, the winner would still be me. Unfortunately, her complacency came too early. The moment the huge pleasure boat slid down, it was fixed in the air as if by magic. Looking carefully, it turned out that Junling's divine lightsaber had already flown out of his hand. It flew through the water curtain and accurately passed through the side of the boat. It rolled up the other anchor and nailed it directly to the stone pier in the middle of the cliff. The pleasure boat was actually hooked and suspended in the waterfall. Ji Chenyu laughed again. This method of yours is still okay, but it can't be protected forever. Ji Chenyu did not even think about it. She waved her sword again. The second black dragon wave roared towards the cliff. The stone pier was swept away again, and the entire boat fell again. However, when she looked down again, Junling, who was on the iron hook below, had already disappeared. Her heart instantly turned cold. How is this possible? She did not notice it, but it did not mean that the audience did not see it. When she released the black dragon wave, the two steel cables were still swinging back and forth. At the moment when they were about to cross, Junling was bold and actually let go of the iron hook. He jumped high and grabbed Ji Chenyu's steel cable. Moreover, he climbed up like a monkey. That inhuman action was absolutely impossible for anyone else to do. Think about it. Madison was such a dangerous and complicated environment. So Junling and the others had already learned the monkey's tree climbing technique to become incomparably skilled. At this moment, the pleasure boat fell into the abyss. In the darkness, two white lights rose with a schwa-schwa sound. Clearly, the two contestants were finally buried in this black hole. But in the next moment, the system's subtitles appeared. Kneel down to me and win. The broadcast room was boiling. Oh, you big sis won. Ha ha ha. You didn't expect it, right? 6666666. I'll support your lungs. I'll support your stomach. I'll support your flowers and riches. How did Big Sis win? It's not simple. I saw it very clearly. That Ji Chenyu turned into light and disappeared first. She was just a fraction of a second faster than Big Sis. Then wouldn't she be angered to death? Indeed, she was almost angered to death. In the VIP room, Ji Chenyu, who was teleported back, was still in a daze. Even when the system notified her that she had been eliminated, she still did not dare to believe it was true. She was so angry that she almost flipped the coffee table. How is this possible? Ji Chenyu's long, shapely eyebrows were raised. I'm clearly stronger than her. How can it be determined that I lost? Wen Yang, who was sitting on the sofa, was silent. Chapter 942. The sun was still high up in the sky, and the mountains looked even more green under the sunlight. Gusts of wind blew through the mountain peaks, and the huge arena seemed very spacious. The two masters stood facing each other. Both of their live streams were silent. The battle had not yet begun, but the austere atmosphere made people feel very nervous. Ding Ming quietly sized up the most legendary character of the Galactic Combat Carnival. From the outside, Lei Jingtian was too ordinary. His looks were ordinary, his body was ordinary, and his clothes were ordinary. He and Ding Ming were similar in that they would not stand out in a crowd. However, Ding Ming's identity could still be uncovered. As for who Lei Jingtian was, he had been a mystery for the past 15 years. Even the Federation's best information-gathering organization could not find a single trace of this person. However, one thing was certain. In reality, Lei Jingtian was definitely not a nobody. He was definitely a famous master. The Lei Jingtian in front of him was about 172 meters tall, about the same height as Ding Ming. He was also short and skinny, and he wore the most common running jersey. From his appearance, he was middle-aged, probably around 70 years old. His face was yellow with a tinge of black, and he looked sickly. However, his eyes were deep and unfathomable. Lei Jingtian was also sizing up this new star. He could not see through Ding Ming, but his attitude was not hostile. "Hello." Ding Ming nodded. "Hello." Lei Jingtian said, "Congratulations." Ding Ming asked, "What are you congratulating me for?" Lei Jingtian said, "You have been chosen." This was a very difficult sentence to understand. Most people understood it as, "Congratulations on being chosen as my opponent. Your journey in the storm gathering will end here." However, Ding Ming did not think so. Lei Jingtian's gaze was very calm, so calm that there was no trace of emotion. At least, Ding Ming could not feel his opponent's fighting spirit. Lei Jingtian finally said something shocking. "Tian Xian, you understand." Tian Xian meant that he was chosen by the heavens. This was a special term used by the Mao Xing civilization's Xinguang technology. Could Lei Jingtian also be a Xinguang martial artist? Just as Ding Ming was thinking about this, a fierce aura suddenly appeared in front of him. This energy was so strong that Ding Ming almost couldn't open his eyes. Lei Jingtian's entire body emitted a formless Genesis flame. Not only was his aura powerful, but he was also able to precisely control his aura within the arena. Based on this alone, Ding Ming did not dare to underestimate him. Ding Ming also began to circulate the origin, and a powerful aura spread out. His entire body burned like a raging inferno. In the eyes of the audience, the two contestants were just standing there quietly, unwilling to make a move for a long time. This was very strange.